If everyone could take their seats, please, and Nancy, would you mind closing that door, as long as you're standing right there? The chair will call to order the meeting of the CUSD 201 Board of Education, today, March 19th, 2013. And roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli?
Here.
Mr. Charleston?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
If we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the March 5th, 2013 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The closed session. I have a quick question. I think on the closed, Dan, you had
Yeah, I
left.
had to leave early that
Okay.
evening, yes.
Okay, so-
I was not
give you-
present for the
Okay.
closed portion.
The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the March 5th, 2013 regular meeting of the Board of Education as amended.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. I abstain.
Any opposed? No, motion carried. Okay, public comment. First, we are going to celebrate success, WTA. And before we do that, if I may have a moment, as long as you're standing there, I'd like to just say congratulations to Ms. Riley for being named by the Chamber of Commerce and Village of Westmont as the Educator of the Year for 2013. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it was, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. It was a great award, wonderful evening, and thanks to everyone involved. It was lots of fun. But right now, I'm here with the Westmont Teachers Association to celebrate success. So tonight, I would like to introduce members of the Early Childhood Program here in District 201. Rosemary Blessman, Doris Emsley, Jill Christensen, and Christy Demas. Sorry, I think I said that right. Rosemary is a graduate of the College of St. Francis and then received her master's degree from Benedictine University in curriculum and instruction. She holds teaching certificates in early childhood, elementary education, secondary education language arts, Montessori, slant multisensory reading, and is a national board certified teacher in reading. She has worked with the First Start program since 1988 and is one of 2 teachers who researched and set up Manning School RAP reading program in 1995. She has over 35 years of teaching experience, with 25 of those years in District 201. Doris received her degree in education from Eastern Illinois University and her master's degree in special ed from Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. She has her Type 75 certification and has taught early childhood for 34 years, 26 of those in District 201. Doris has been nominated for the Golden Apple Award and Disney Teacher of the Year. Jill is the morning First Start teacher at South School. She graduated from Bradley University in 2012 with her degree in early childhood, special education, and a minor in Spanish. She is happy to be part of the early childhood team and is currently working with the Illinois Resource Center by field testing the new Illinois Early Learning Draft Standards in the First Start classroom. And Christy graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with a degree in speech and hearing science with a concentration in speech pathology. This is their 3rd year in the First Start program working as a paraprofessional. I'd like to introduce the team.
good evening, and thank you for letting us share with you some pictures that show our transition to the South School's new Early Childhood Center. I'm Rosemary Blessman. I teach the PM First Start program. This is Jill Christensen. She's the First Start teacher in the morning. Mrs. Doris Emsley is the early childhood teacher, and Ms. Demas is our paraprofessional and First Start teaching partner in our program. Currently, we have approximately 60 3-, 4-, and 5-year-olds at South School, and we have blended some of our activities between the First Start and the early childhood programs. For example, when the children first arrive at school, the first thing they do is take care of their coats and backpacks. Yes, during the winter, that's also meant boots, scarves, mittens, gloves, and hats. Then they go and wash their hands, and they get together in the hallway outside the classrooms for music and movement activity, and that's led by the classroom teachers each morning. We are fortunate that on Wednesdays, Mr. Harold, who is the music teacher for the rest of the district, joins us for about 20 minutes on Wednesday morning with the First Start program and early childhood programs, and then joins us for an additional music and movement time in the afternoons.
One of the best things about our preschool space is our new gym facility. In one area, the children can practice balancing on the balance beam or tumble on the gym mats. In the center area, there are 2 pieces of climbing equipment and a playhouse for imaginary play. Around the climbing equipment is a track for the children to use bikes, scooters, cozy coops, or just run and jog. By shopping frugally at garage sales and resale shops, we have been able to purchase additional materials, including plastic panels to designate an area for basketball. There is even an area designated for quiet play with a water table, puzzles, blocks. The gym area is probably the most loved place at South School.
Okay. First Start is so excited to have a very spacious classroom. We serve about 20 children, and we have all types of play and learning in our classroom. In the front of the room, we have a group for whole group instruction, and this is our rug space too. We use this space to act out stories, and we work together on big floor puzzles. We also have acted out a lot of nursery rhymes, so this is a picture of them acting out Jack and Jill and going up the hill and then falling down the hill. They love it. We also have a quiet area, which includes 2 student computers, and we also have the children's reading area. We have a table for small group literacy instruction where the children can draw and write in their journals. They create pages for class books, and they talk about their field trips at that table. There are also tables for children to work with manipulatives, and this is in our math area. They can work with patterning and sorting materials, which is very important for their age. Over in the art area, we have an easel. We also have materials for finger painting, stencils, scissors, clipboards, and other fun art activities. We also have a discovery table in our classroom, which is one of their favorite areas to go. This is a place where the children can explore their environment, so sometimes we'll have snow in there, we'll have water or sand, and they can use shovels and measuring cups to just explore in that discovery table. We also have an area for building with blocks and ramps and Legos and trains and all of the other things. We have people and furniture from the dollhouse so they can actually act out their own stories in that area. And because children at this age often benefit for a little extra attention, we also have some volunteers who work in our classroom. We have a grandma that comes in once a month to do various projects. We also have some parents who come in weekly or whenever they can to help out. And then we also have a community member who, her children actually graduated from District 201, and she comes in regularly just to be an extra pair of hands in our classroom. So we're really happy to have our space.
The Early Childhood Program utilizes the gym facility for the development of gross motor skills, socialization, and play skills. Occupational and physical therapy services are provided in a variety of settings, such as individual and group in the classroom as well as the gym. Speech and language services are also provided in individual and group settings. This little boy has marshmallow fluff on his upper and lower lip to practice producing the F sound. Music is an important component to the early childhood classroom. We have the music and movement activities upon arrival with the First Start children, and also have a theme-based music session and also a music session based on concepts including shapes, colors, numbers, etc. A wonderful addition to our music and classroom time is the Smart Board. Teachers share creative activities through the Smart Exchange. After our theme-based music, the children follow a color-coded schedule to participate at center times. A teacher or paraprofessional guides each student through the hands-on activities based on the children's individual needs, including sequencing shapes, counting out gold coins, sorting animals into families, and strengthening fine motor skills while playing with containers of snow.
Our early childhood team has spent over 100 combined hours working together during the summer, late at night, and after school, setting up these 2 classrooms and the gym space. We realize we still have some goals to achieve. We need to have appropriate cubby space for the children and for their belongings, and for the many materials that the early childhood classrooms need available throughout the year. We need to meet the ever-changing needs of children who are developing from early toddlers to maturing preschoolers to more independent children who are ready for kindergarten. These are the children that can be included in our classrooms at any one time.
We also have plans to set up a conference library room and offices to be used for small group interventions, itinerant services, testing conducted by our psychologist, social worker, speech therapist, occupational and physical therapist, and a nurse's station. Currently, we are using the gym and hallways for these vital services. It is critical to our program to have a dedicated space for library, music, and story time as well. These elements support our commitment to the development of literacy skills as well as forming a strong partnership with parents. We enjoy singing songs and dancing during music time with the music teacher each week. We look forward to incorporating story time by a storyteller and organized physical activities with a certified gym teacher. These specialists would allow for necessary planning time to be integrated into the school day. We are also working with the Village of Westmont to ensure safety with bus arrivals and departures and to provide additional walkways for our students during bus and car pickup and drop-off. We appreciate this opportunity to show you a glimpse of our programs and services. The early childhood staff encourages continued support of our preschool community in order to create an environment where children can learn and grow. Thank you.
I think we're all looking forward to expansion of the program. Those of us who have had children go through the program understand how absolutely critical it is to get our early learners off on the very best start we possibly can. And so I'm very excited at what we're moving toward with the Early Childhood Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda are any other public comments? Okay. We will then move on to the consent agenda. And the first item, personnel recommendations, we are going to poll at this point and discuss that in closed. So are there any other questions?
On the student tour, is there a staff member that's going on that student tour with the student?
Yeah, that would be Bridget Durbin.
Okay. Is there stipend attached to that as well, or how does that work?
For BPA? I'd have to check
I'm
and
not
see.
sure.
But I know the direct cost of the tour is covered by the student, right? But just other than the insurance aspect, are there any other costs borne by the district related to that?
Other costs borne by the district?
Other than, I mean, the transportation, the hotel,
We cover. So do we cover all of that?
yes.
Right. So, at the risk of being the Scrooge in the room, so for one student,
I've had discussions with Bridget about making sure that the group fundraises in anticipation of that for next year.
This, I mean, every spring we've had students qualify, and the district has covered that cost.
Yes, and my recollection, though, is that we sent, multiple students, as opposed to simply one, and just, again, there's a broader conversation that's going to happen tonight about resources. So, just to beg the question about how strongly we feel about the efficacy of, allocating these for one student to, and not to denigrate in any way, shape, or form. I mean, least of all me, who's, an accountant by training and in the finance business on a regular basis, on a daily basis. So, but the efficacy of one student going, I sort of question. And if I'm alone, that's fine. I felt it, just reasonable to put it out there.
Is this any different than any other student tour that we do? Or does it fall in the same caveat?
It's, well, the difference is most of our student tours are, there isn't as, they're usually in the state of Illinois. There isn't the travel, outside the state. And so that's what makes this a little bit unique. But unfortunately, for this organization, they always, their nationals are always outside, the state.
So it looks like, according to this, the 2 students qualified, but only 1 can go.
Right.
So
The other student has a conflict.
Okay, any other questions? The chair will entertain a motion to approve.
I'm sorry, because I did just have one other question
Oh,
about
I'm
a
sorry.
different item. On the monetary donation, is that like money on top of what's already budgeted kind of thing?
It's actually, it was a donation
Yeah.
for the activity account.
Oh, okay, I
So
understand.
it will go in for, extra items, but again,
Okay, great.
we monitor
Yeah.
what those expenditure, what gets spent out of those activity
sounds great.
accounts.
Thank you.
Was that it, Dan?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Number 1, approval of student tour. 2, approval of IHSA membership. 3, approval of SACID classroom lease agreement. 4, approval of monetary donation. 5, abatement of working cash funds. 6, approval of March 2013 expenditure report. And 7, ratification of February 2013 regular payroll.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, so then what we will do is, on the personnel recommendations, we will have our discussion in closed, and then come back out after that and vote at that time. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the annual report on library programs.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having us. It's our privilege to be here to report on the library programs this year for 2012-2013. I wanted to introduce my fellow media specialists, Karen Johnson from Manning and Rebecca Johnston from Miller, Amy Jordan, who couldn't be with us today from Westmont Junior High, and I'm Michelle Therese, or Teresi. That's an inside joke. Okay, so research indicates that school librarians have been advocating for the integration of critical thinking and problem-solving skills since the 1983 landmark report, A Nation at Risk, was first published. This report identified the management of information as an important skill in a learning society. Shortly thereafter, the National Commission on Libraries and Information Science published Educating Students to Think, and Information Skills for an Information Society. This research led to the formation of the National Forum of Information Literacy in 1990, which was a think tank of 75 professional associations, including the National Education Association and the American Library Association. The identification of information literacy as an essential component of a K-12 education was further affirmed by the American Association of School Librarians in their 1988 publication, Information Power, and later in their publication of Information Literacy Standards for Student Learning. We share this with you today because these same skills that were identified in this early research, for example, critical thinking, interdisciplinary thinking and learning, valuing evidence, communicating to an audience, understanding multicultural perspectives, and using digital media and technology strategically, these are the same skills that are the foundation of the Common Core. As information specialists in the field that emphasizes the importance of teaching students how to interact with information, we are in the best position to share our expertise and collaborate with teachers to support the integration of information literacy across the curriculum. And so here are some of the ways in which we are already doing that. On collaboration and the Common Core. Our elementary media specialists collaborate in their respective schools on units of study in which instructional responsibilities are shared between the classroom and library settings. Units covered include author studies, genres, careers, the Hall of History, current events, famous historical people, Midwestern states, the five senses, rainforest animals, weather, and the science fair. Collaboration at both schools is an ongoing process with evolving opportunities for new units. In addition to units that support the curriculum, both elementary schools collaborate with teams to unpack and deconstruct the standards, create and modify lesson plans to align with the standards, and to support teachers by reinforcing those standards. At the high school, we work with the teachers to identify student outcomes, design units that build research and collaboration skills, and support reading and writing across the curriculum. As a media specialist at the high school, I'm also part of the English and History department, and I work closely with the teachers on developing research projects and assessments. And last fall, I presented with my English department colleagues at the National Council of Teachers of English on digital storytelling. On a school-wide district level, I am also part of the District Curriculum Advisory Committee and the district leadership team. At all schools, we serve as tech facilitators for our respective buildings. So this means that we support various district initiatives, including software support, professional development, and equipment maintenance. In addition, we offer a variety of workshops for faculty that include, at the elementary school, Gale, Kids Infobits, Storyboard, Pixie, Google Apps, and at the middle school and high school, Gale, Google Docs, Twitter, ePortfolios, and Edmodo. Literacy is a core value about which we are very passionate. We are committed to supporting literacy instruction across the district by providing quality literature and suggested text to our teachers and students, offering book clubs, and supporting and integrating new literacies which prepare our students to interact with information electronically. And at all grade levels, we include lessons in digital citizenship and internet safety. In addition, we are committed to providing support and instruction on information literacy so that our students are able to interact, interpret, utilize a variety of texts in their research and studies. At the elementary schools, for example, students are engaged in reading for a variety of purposes. Fiction read-alouds combined with readings from informative and persuasive nonfiction resources provide a range of literacy experiences. Both schools participate in the Illinois Blue STEM and Monarch K-3 Readers' Choice Awards, and both schools participate in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade book clubs. Copyright and citations are introduced at the elementary level, where students begin to compare and contrast the reliability of websites and the need for specific search terms. Students are also start to collaborate with each other on group projects, integrating research, print, and technology. Our teachers at Westmont Junior High are extremely focused on literacy. Therefore, many of their assignments depend on the library for support and electronic resources. And at the high school, we focus on introducing students to the rigor of academic research, including building media literacy skills, developing the ability to analyze text, thinking critically, and using technology to solve problems, which is the foundation of our information literacy instruction. I'd also like to provide you with a summary of our collection development at all of our schools. This is a very valuable yet often overlooked component of our position. As information specialists, we work hard to understand what books, internet resources, tech tools, and equipment our teachers need to support the curriculum. Part of this process includes a devotion to reviewing the literature and pre-reading titles, attending workshops, and keeping apprised of new authors, literary genres, and media that match the needs of the teachers and the interests of our students. At Manning, we've added over 200 titles to our collection to support the curriculum and provide options for independent reading at various lexile levels. Miller's collection has grown this year with a variety of reading materials and resources. Approximately 300 new titles have been added there. Westmont Junior High School, At Westmont Junior High School, we've purchased approximately 300 new titles for our collection. Our mythology section has continued to grow and support the 6th grade mythology unit. Additionally, many new books have been purchased to support the 7th grade biography project and the 8th grade decades project. At the high school, we've added over 320 books at various reading levels, including award-winning titles and books about current events and contemporary issues. Books that encourage youth engagement and citizenship, books that challenge students to think critically and solve problems, and we continue to add to our growing collection of historical and multicultural fiction, which directly supports our English and history curricula. In addition, we've added several scholarly research journals to the high school collection that act as informational texts to support the Common Core, and these include Science, Nature, Harvard Magazine, and International Review, Granta Literary Review, and The Ecologist. At all schools, we now subscribe to Gale, an award-winning publisher of online database and reference material, and these include 4 specialty databases at the high school which focus on literature and science. In addition to these resources, our students are benefiting from recent renovations and upgrades to the Manning and Miller libraries, which include adding adjacent computer labs, movable shelving, comfortable reading areas, and smart boards. These changes have definitely been integral to boosting the flexibility of the space and the future of our library program. On professional and community engagement, as leaders in information literacy, we're engaged in our profession and committed to staying connected to our communities through reading professional journals and attending and presenting at conferences and engaging with the larger Westmont community. Some of the conferences we've attended include the Illinois School Library Media Association, Illinois Computer Educators National Council of Teachers of English, the Metro English Chair, Barnes & Noble workshops we've presented at, and some of us look forward to attending the Google for Educators Summit over spring break, and the annual American Library Association conference this summer. Can't miss that. Our work extends beyond the bricks and mortar of our respective buildings. We want to encourage our students to stay connected to their communities and work to ensure that we offer opportunities for authentic engagement. At Manning, community agencies and businesses are a key component to the 2nd grade community career unit. Many respective representatives come to share information about their careers and how they help the community work safely together. Miller's kindergarten and 1st grade graders partnered with the Westmont Public Library to tour the facility and offer story time as a final component of the Writers' Workshop. And the Salt Creek Ballet also pairs with both elementary schools to present a literary through the arts program during which the 2nd grade students experience a folk and fairy tale combined with movement and dance. At the high school, we work closely with Westmont Public Library to promote community involvement and collaboration by holding our annual Oral History Film Festival at the library. And this year, we're working to extend the Oral History Project to the Gregg House Museum in Westmont. Additionally, I'll be working with Jack, our principal, and other area principals and educators to plan a virtual professional learning community for the first annual Chicagoland AP Reflection and Renewal Conference to be held at Westmont High School on May 20th. By the numbers, how does this all translate? So, because we have the opportunity to work with students at all levels in our libraries and computer labs, we are able to provide a level of cohesiveness in our schools that no other position offers by connecting students, teachers, and curriculum with the technology and resources that support Common Core, and by providing the knowledge and experience to align these resources with the curriculum. Karen Johnson sees approximately 35 classes a week at Manning, 19 for book checkout, 16 for instruction classes at 5 grade levels. She circulates over 900 to 1,000 books each week. Manning welcomes 450 students to library each week, some for one visit, while most visit the library twice. Most will visit the library twice. Rebecca Johnston sees 22 classes at Miller, 12 for book checkout, and 10 instructional classes. She circulates over 400 books per week. Miller has 187 students who visit the library weekly. Kindergartners visit once a week, while the first through fifth graders visit twice a week. At the junior high, Amy Jordan helps students adapt to the library as a shared space for learning, with over 60 classes visiting the junior high library media center to check out books and work in the computer lab. At the high school, we service an average of 1,253 students visits a week, which includes 37 classes that visit one of our 2 labs and 431 independent learner visits, most of whom come to the media center before or after school, during lunch, or during their study hall for readers advisory, academic support, resources, or technology training and support. And as the high school media specialist, I also engage in an average of 31 instructional, planning, and support activities with faculty per week, during which I work with teachers to provide instruction on information literacy, developing lesson plans, or research on resources that support the curriculum. So looking forward, research has repeatedly shown that strong library media programs increase student achievement. This research indicates that a successful library program is made up of numerous important elements, including well-staffed library media centers, investment in large and better quality collections of information resources, increased opportunities for students to visit the library, and more time to collaborate with classroom teachers to integrate information literacy into the curriculum. Your continued support of these elements, along with the renovated media spaces at Manning and Miller, will allow for our library media program growth in the future. We are committed to supporting the district, and we thank you for your support and commitment to ensure that these valuable resources will always be available to our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you walk away, can I just ask, now that we're like 3/4 into the school year, what do our elementary children think of the library? They look like they're having a great time. Yeah.
Oh, they love it, yes.
Good.
Especially the stairs.
Yeah.
The reading area. They're a favorite for not only story time, but for individual time when they found a book.
And the top stair.
Yeah, I think we just saw a picture of
I
that.
also think that they love the transition between computer lab and library. We can make a smooth transition. If we're talking about something at the tables, we could pop over to the lab, vice versa. It is a great combination to have those together.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
I feel compelled to notice that this presentation wasn't just for information only, but that you guys also have been awarded, as you have been in previous years, a library grant attached to this presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is presentation of monthly financial statements. Ms. Anderson?
Okay. Again, the state continues to owe the district for mandated categoricals that they're behind in. Overall, they owe the district $376,000. $253,000 of that is due to the education and tort funds, and $104,000 is due to the transportation fund. Again, this is the same scenario we've been operating under for the past couple years. We did get some information, preliminary information from the governor's office, and they are looking at proposed additional reductions in general state aid and mandated categoricals next year, including reductions in the Illinois free lunch and breakfast and the regular and vocational transportation categories. With the sequester, we're also looking at potential cuts from 7 to 9% of our federal funding. And that's anywhere, I think, from about $40,000 to $55,000. Next year, we won't know that for a while until they figure things out. And then as far as expenditures go, we're running as projected. And the operations and maintenance fund, those expenditures continue to be a little bit lower than anticipated. And again, part of that is attributable to some mild weather, so our overtime has not been as great as anticipated, and our utility costs are a little bit lower than budgeted. And transportation fund expenditures are a little bit low at this point in time, but again, Westway is...
How far are they behind?
They missed some billing for some December, so we just got those, and
So around number?
we should be, I don't know.
Okay.
We just paid those in, so we should be on target. I think they should be caught up now with their billing and on cycle.
As of the February?
In March.
Or March, okay,
In
March. Okay, very
Yeah.
good.
So,
And that's the state aid stuff that you mentioned, in terms of what the governor's office has sort of proposed. Have you put a round number to that in terms of its impact on us?
not yet, because the proration, I mean, for regular and vocational transportation, we hardly get any funding for that. And part of that's because our district's so small, and it's based on miles traveled, so we don't travel very many miles, but our expenditures are high.
Thinking more about
So-
the GSA piece and the proration piece,
No, I haven't worked on that yet.
because that could be reasonably sizable.
Well, they're already prorating it now, and so
Yeah,
it's just
I
a
understand.
smaller additional proration. But I don't know how they're going to, how it's going to impact our, the poverty grant piece, because the majority, almost 1.5 to 2 times our general state aid is based on our poverty, our low-income levels, and I don't know how they're going to impact that, because the rest of our funding is flat grant-based, and that's $218 per ADA. So that piece isn't as large a component as the other piece. Let's see, and then the investments are included, as well as the activity fund balances and fund balances, and then the lunch report is included. Does anyone have any other questions?
Thank you for keeping us updated in your information about sad news from the state and federal government. I say that in the hopes that something gets fixed on that. So I appreciate that.
In addition, we approved the SACIT lease, which also contains a fairly sizable reduction in rental revenue as well. So for what it's worth, as conversations advance, particularly at the state and federal level, you know, and including at the SACIT reduction in revenue, you know, obviously those numbers start to pile up fairly quickly. And so, you know, I think as soon as you have sort of a good sense for round numbers, even if it's before the budgeting process,
Yeah, we'll
worthwhile to know.
update these. And the information from the state just came out, so I haven't run a new model. So we'll throw in the proration for GSA to see what that does, and I'll report that back to you. And then I'll also be adding in the 7 to 9% sequester of federal funds, just to kind of see what things look like.
Okay, that's
That's it.
okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda, 2013-2014 staffing discussion.
I'm going to go over to the. I will, we talked about some of these issues at our last board meeting, and then in the board book, I have some of the information. I just want to highlight some of these areas, and then Mr. Baldwin is here from the high school, and Mr. Jack Jonak from the junior high to talk a little bit about their staffing needs. And then I can talk to the board about different scenarios as we move forward. But this is in terms of expanding our early childhood program, and what we would look to do is to create an all-day program that would be geared towards students that typically we would have to place out of district because we don't have an all-day program. And the cost estimates there for a classroom teacher would be approximately $55,000, and then to a teacher assistants would be $34,000 approximately, and then the average insurance, if all the employees chose insurance, would be about $30,000. At this time, Linda Clower thinks she can work within the speech and OT and PT services, and so no additional cost there. And so it would be a total of $119,000. Now, it seems like, in light of some of the information Kim shared with us a couple minutes ago, taking on other costs. But again, these are students that typically we would need to send out of district because we don't have the appropriate programming. And typically, the tuition is about $35,000 per student. And so in round numbers, if roughly 4 students, you have attend that program, if you had that number, you'd be at about $140,000. And so very quickly, you offset that cost. And there's even a little bit of a cushion so that if indeed there needed to be additional FTE for speech or OT or PT, there's a little bit of a cushion built in. So I think that program of itself, there isn't additional FTE that's borne by the district. And so I think that to me is easily a recommendation to make. With the all-day kindergarten program that we've been talking about, and I adjusted the numbers a little bit because Kim let me know I might be a little too conservative. So I said, all right. So with classroom FTE, again, currently we have 2.5 FTE invested in kindergarten. And if we're looking at 4 sections, that's an additional 1.5 FTE. And so we're estimating about $91,500 for that. Insurance, again, depending upon if an individual takes insurance, that's $10,000. Specials, we're estimating about 0.4 FTE, about $22,000. And then supplies and materials, $10,000 there. And the way that we're looking at that is because we're looking at making some changes at South, we think there are some opportunities to provide additional supplies and materials as a result of that for the kindergarten program. The staff would need some time for summer curriculum work. We're estimating about $4,300 for that. Transportation, we're not anticipating any changes in transportation costs. And again, breakfast, lunch, about $3,200. And so the cost of the program would be about $141,000. And because you've seen the memo on staffing, you know that there are other needs within the district as well. And so trying to get to accomplish as much as we can within the FTE that we have. My recommendation would be that our all-day kindergarten would be a tuition-based program. And still at that $2,500 to $3,000 price range, what that basically translates to is we need about 50 tuition-paying students. If we have 50 tuition-paying students, it pays for itself, basically. And then with that, then we're able to do the all-day program. You have to provide the option for a half-day program. And there are some questions that you're just not going to be able to answer until you find out what people select. But typically when districts offer an all-day program, there are very few families that choose half-day. And again, typically the way that's handled is those students attend the morning session, and then it's up to the board of the district whether or not transportation is provided at the end of the morning. In a situation where maybe, for whatever reason, we have a large number of parents who would choose half-day, well, then you could very conceivably run, a morning session, afternoon session, and then your other sessions are all-day programs. So until you see those numbers, you kind of staff accordingly. The other thing, too, is in terms of dual language, and I believe it's April 16th, and I'll talk a little bit about this during the superintendent's report as well. There's the possibility that the board may want to go with the dual language program, in which case we'd have 3 sections of what I would traditional kindergarten, and then 1 section of dual language. If we opt not to do that for next year, then we would have 4 traditional, and then there's the possibility, and this is driven by the state, it's not our choice, but if you get to that ceiling of 20 students in the same classroom that are ESL, then you would need to have a self-contained program. And so, again, you would have 1 section self-contained and 3 sections traditional. One of the conversations we've had as an admin team in terms of, how do you section it and so forth, and I know that was a question that the board had. Realistically, because the dual language program, you'd be pulling from both attendance centers. And if our numbers run true as they have been, you very realistically could have 1 section of dual language that's supported by both attendance centers and still have sufficient numbers to have a section at Miller and then 2 sections at Manning. So there's a very real possibility that you would have that. In the event that you have an unbalance, well, then we would probably handle that similar to how we've handled other imbalances in the past, where you provide parents that opportunity, to attend a smaller, a classroom with a smaller class size. But I know last time when we talked and we were talking about possibly mixing students, I think that probably created more questions and more concern. And I think, again, that's one of those things that our kindergarten registration is April 15th. And then, again, you have a better handle on the numbers, the attendance centers, where they're coming from. I'll give you an example. This year we have 31 kindergartners at Miller this year, which is a larger size than we typically have. And so if that's a trend, we may, it may work itself out. So I think, but at this point, again, anticipating some of the other conversations we're going to have this evening, to go to an all-day kindergarten program, I think really it would have to be tuition-based in order to make it work, because I think there's so many other needs with that FTE and as we go down that road.
And the tuition, would that simply be for the full-day option? That wouldn't be for the half-day option, or would it be or would you prorate it for the half-day option?
That's a conversation. Typically, it's for the full-day option.
Because we obviously offer half-day.
Right, because currently we offer the half-day, so typically it's for the full-day option. So,
Kevin, I have some concerns too about the cost of the program, but would you prefer to wait till you finished your presentation? Or?
Yeah, if I could, and then we can address those. And then we get the staffing for the junior high, and John presented last week regarding that, and this is just kind of summary fashion, although I think this is, I've got the wrong, this is, I apologize, because I've got 2 of the same slide, and I probably deleted the wrong slide because there was, but with the Well, let me go through the high school first, and then we'll talk about the junior high. The high school, basically, this is driven twofold by need at the high school in terms of balancing class size, but also it's driven by student selection, so that drives the FTE. But currently, family consumer science, the high school is anticipating we have a retirement, and so rather than continuing to have all the FTE at the high school level or at the family consumer science, they're looking at 0.2 in family consumer science, and then they're able to shift 0.8 throughout the building. Social studies, there's increased requirements in government and world history, and so that naturally is going to cause an increase in FTE for social studies, so 1.2 FTE. Literacy, in order to support literacy in the building, and then also for staff coaching, 0.5 FTE. And then English and math, the high school at one time had, for at-risk freshman students, they had a block for math and language arts. And so seeing that that's a need within the building, the high school would like to bring that back. And then college readiness is something that has been working effectively at the high school, and so we'd like to continue with that, and that's 0.4 FTE. Fine arts, we actually have a reduction in fine arts, and so that's a minus 0.2. And then for the PE, it's minus 0.2 as well. So all in all, that translates to an increase of 1.7 at the high school. The junior high, and you have this in your board book, and again, I apologize for the slide, but basically the high school, and this is what Jack's doing, you know, that literacy, part of that also is support for ESL students. I should also mention that, because one of the things, we were audited by the State Board of Ed for our ESL program, and overall, the audit's going to come back positive. But one of the areas that they're going to note that we need to consider, and at least at the time that they met with Kelly Boss and I to do the post or the exit interview, they indicated that this wouldn't necessarily be a mandate, but more along the lines of a suggestion. But what they pointed out to us, that they think at the elementary level we're pretty well versed for ESL support. We're doing a pretty good job at that level. But at the secondary level, junior high and high school level, they said we really, if we can, try to bolster that at that level. And so Jack's doing that through the literacy. John Jonak is doing that through the, and actually I can probably, if I turn on the dock camera, I can probably put that under there. And then, there you go. So this is a slide that should have been there. But basically with the junior high, 0.5 FTE, and that will allow us to strengthen the ESL program, and then also add Spanish at the junior high. Literacy, 1.0 FTE, and that's to help reduce some class sizes. The math curriculum, and I know there's some questions about that, and John can talk a little bit about the transition they're looking at in math, if the board would like. But typically, we only have a small number of students who take geometry, and they actually walk across the street to do that. Well, because of the numbers for next year, it makes more sense to keep those students at the junior high, and so that accounts for the 0.4 FTE. And then in order to accommodate electives in the area of music, 0.4 FTE, and so we end up with an addition of 2.3 FTE. And so, and then the one other slide is in terms of, there is questions about program cost. If, for instance, at the junior high, what do some of these changes entail in terms of cost? Spanish ESL materials, that would be about a $4,500 expenditure, but we think that can come from the Title I grant. PBL and tech, which is an exploratory that the junior high will have, they'll be using Chromebooks, and That would be a $3,900 expenditure if we go with the Chromebooks, but then there's also the possibility of, rather than using the Chromebooks, just using the computer lab. Songwriting, which is one of the electives that would be added at the music program, would be about $1,500, and that would be out of next year's budget for the junior high. For social studies, Chromebooks and a cart is about $11,000, and John thinks he can actually use part of this year's budget to cover that. RTI interventions, $2,625, and that would come out of next year's budget. And then summer curriculum work again, because we're going to have teachers working on curriculum throughout the summer. And so we're estimating about $7,400. And depending upon when they do that work, it could be out of the 12-13 budget or it's out of the 13-14 budget. So all told, those program changes for the junior high would be about $3,100. I had a conversation with Jack regarding the high school, and he believes any cost, if you, and I'll mention this again, part of the superintendent's report, but the high school is receiving an AP grant, and so that would help with a lot of the staff development and those types of things related to that. And so Jack really doesn't anticipate any significant costs as a result of what he's asking for in terms of the FTE. Well, before I get kind of, okay, what do we do with the FTE? Did you want to ask your question then, Gary, or?
Well, I just have some concern about the cost of the kindergarten program, all-day kindergarten. I can certainly appreciate trying to make it cost neutral or to cover the full cost, but I worry that there's going to be too many families, maybe mom and dad, maybe mom works during the day and dad works during the night, and they're home during the day, somebody is, okay? So why should I pay $3,000 for all-day kindergarten? Maybe they're not low income, but they're just struggling like so many people are today. I worry about that. But what it really comes down to is I don't want to create the education gap at the kindergarten level going into first grade. And the more kids that we can get into the all-day program, the better off we're going to be when we get them into first grade, second grade, and third grade. So that's where my true concern lies. How do we get as many students as we possibly can into the all-day kindergarten so that when they get to first grade, they're all on the same level, instead of creating a wider gap between some of the students when they get to first grade? I have a very strong concern about that, and I think if we made the program a lot more, should we say, tuition-friendly than what I'm seeing here on this piece of paper, $2,500 to $3,000, I think we would hit more kids into the program. And I mean, if you're going to ask me for a number, what I'm thinking, I would think somewhere between $500 and $900 per student, just to help offset some of the costs of the additional teachers. Okay, I mean, I would love to make it cost neutral, but I would much rather get more children in the seat and close that education gap right from the get-go, right from the start, right from kindergarten, so that when we have them in first, second, and third grade, we don't have as much differences in the classroom. More of the kids are together at the same level. And I have a strong concern for that. So,
and I definitely understand that, and and that's a nice segue into the FTE, because the goal is always to be as fiscally responsible and do as much as we can, and at the same time, though, if at the end of our conversation, if the board is comfortable taking on some additional expense, then yes, we can model something different for tuition, which may end up, at a lower price point. You get more than 50 to help offset the lower cost. You may, and then it also maybe encourages more families to take advantage of all-day kindergarten, but with the understanding that we're going to take on additional costs. So that's something that definitely, at the end of our conversation, if that's part of the direction from the board, then that's something that we can do. In terms of the FTE, and again, this is included in the memo to the board, but if you want to do this again as cost neutral as possible, then you have to shift FTE. And so when you look at, and if you recall, I think it was 2 years ago, we were reducing FTE And part of that was also driven by the fact that we were seeing declining enrollments. At that time, we had small enrollments at the junior high, small enrollments at the high school, and so we were able to throttle back FTE there, and we really didn't adjust FTE at the elementary levels because we weren't seeing that drop off. And now, that we're starting to see the shift to the junior high, eventually it's going to shift to the high school, and so naturally, there may be need for some additional FTE as we, the next couple of years as we move along. But in order to make it cost neutral, and I had pointed this out to the board, naturally we have the 5th grade at Manning, currently 4 sections. They're moving into the junior high. So, and there isn't another bubble at a lower grade that would warrant rolling that back. So I think that 1.0 FTE, I think most people would be comfortable with that because there really isn't that need at the elementary level. 4th grade is currently 4 sections. It possibly could be moved to 3 sections, which again saves you another additional FTE. And then when we look at Miller, you have small sections at the current 1st grade. When they roll up to 2nd grade, you can possibly create 1 section out of that. And then also with the current 2nd grade at Miller, you roll them forward and reduce the section. So, you could, again, if the emphasis is on just making it as cost neutral as possible, you could then save 4 FTE. You need 4 FTE at the junior high and the high school, and you're there. Now, I will tell you that today I probably have received more emails than I have ever received. Interesting enough, it's from families who attend Manning, it's from families who attend Miller. I mean, it's equal. Concern about, increasing class sizes at the elementary level. And I think part of the thinking is, and I can understand this, is are we staffing our junior high and the high school on the backs of the lower grades? And there's definitely, one could look at that scenario and see that. And so, and then there's the other things that come into this. And I know just based upon questions we've had at the board table, and I know based upon just emails again and questions about, as we're moving forward in this decision making, that there's concern also when you look at demographics and needs of students, and is it always wisest to increase class sizes when we know that we're running at 40%, free and reduced, or 18%, or IAPs in the district, and different demographics like that. And so I think it does become difficult to say, yes, let's reduce the FTE, roll it into the high school and junior high, and make this work. So given that, again, I think the 1.0 FTE from the 5th grade rolling into the junior high, hopefully that doesn't create a lot of angst for anybody, because that's natural progression, The other thing to keep in mind is that next year we'll pick up an additional FTE, because the 4th grade at Manning, that will be 5th grade next year, they're going to roll into the junior high, and we're going to pick up another FTE. And so, in 2 years, I guess you recoup it. I think part of the discussion, though, is when we look at Miller, we do have a retirement at Miller. And so there is the possibility, again, if you look at the smallest class size, which is 24, do you consider making that 1 section, but then not compressing the other section, so that effectively we're at 2 FTE. I can share with you that with a lot of pencil pushing and number crunching and everything, that through replacing retirees and staff at lower salaries and so forth, if we make that commitment, you can pick up another 0.65 FTE, so you're at roughly 2.65 FTE. And then it comes down to, I think, a question of either us going back to the junior high and the high school and seeing if we have really explored every possibility, or maybe as a district explore every possibility to try to make some savings to offset additional FTE that we need. I think that has to be with the caveat that next year we don't have Mr. Balderman, Mr. Jonak coming forward and saying, hey, we need more FTE. I think we'd have to, because we are going to have some retirements again. So I guess here's the quick summary. Can we survive next year without making the reduction in FTE and adding the programs? Yes, we can. The question always comes up, sustainability. I mean, that's the next question because, again, we're looking at, depending upon what happens with the proposed budget from the governor, we don't know what that means for school funding. And so there's always the possibility that we could see a decline in state funding. So then down the road, are we, again, having some conversations about, well, what do we cut back on in order to make ends meet, Or the other possibility, which is not any more attractive, is between now and you get to that point, do we start having our conversation with our community about how much they value the education we provide, and are they willing to support it through some type of a rate increase to offset what's occurring with the state, and then also to help us maintain the programs and not to see our fund balances continue to erode. So.
Okay, before you say, can I just, in the interest of where I sit, can we figure out a way to have this, because there's a lot here. So I'm asking everybody, obviously I can speak for myself. I've received a lot of emails, phone calls, blah, blah, blah. I can't speak for anyone else. But what do we want to talk about first? Because there's a lot here.
Right.
And we still, Mr. Jonak, we had talked to him last meeting. He was going to come back with some more details and things. What do you think is the best way to go about this? And I know they overlap, but we should probably have some, I know I have a lot of questions. So what do you think is the best way to do this?
Probably, in terms of the staffing, we need to reach some consensus on how do we want to approach it for next year. Again, and I'm pretty confident I'm not going to get consensus on this. Again, we could say let's essentially reduce sections at Manning and at Miller, get to 4, and call it a day. But I don't think I'm going to get consensus on that. So then, and again, I will concede the 1.0. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think anybody's going to argue we should roll that back into at the elementary level. But yeah, that should help out what's going on at the high school and junior high. So then the next question that comes up, and I told you that we can, with very careful hiring, we can save ourselves 0.65 FTE. So, I guess the first question is that enough? And then we, again, maybe go back a little bit and sharpen pencils and see what other opportunities there are for cost reduction in other areas. And then, I think it does, and not that we have to decide this, but we do have to then have that conversation about, okay, going forward, that means that we are going to have some conversation about how do we stem the tide, on a more permanent basis. The other thing that I think creates, and I was having a conversation this afternoon, we have attendance guidelines, and I think what always creates anxiety is, when you apply those, and when you apply those to grade levels where parents are used to having a certain amount of staffing, and all of a sudden, it's kind of, from their perspective, there's no rhyme or reason. Why all of a sudden is it this year, that we're doing that? And so possibly another long-term solution is, as we get grade levels entering our district, we really apply those guidelines, because as those students move through the system, that's what they understand. That's how it's done. And then, but again, that's kind of a long-range plan. So I think the first conversation is, is the 1.65, are we okay with that? And then we as an administrative team find other opportunities.
Okay, so you want to start with staffing?
Right.
Because I think that's probably the third rail. So,
Well, if we have questions about staffing for
Yeah,
John or Jack?
yeah,
They'd be happy to step up here, and I can step to the side.
Jack, you're
Happy's
on.
a strong.
What's that?
Happy is a strong.
I have a real quick question for Jack, and maybe it's a combo question, but you're pulling, or you need an additional 0.4 FTE at the junior high for the math, the 30 students, but that's not coming back to the high school, that 0.4. So in other words, is there someone at the high school that's got the 0.4 right now that's teaching the geometry? So won't that free up 0.4 of that person's time? No.
Because, again, well, do you want to answer, Jake, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Well,
I can explain it if you guys can't.
I can answer it, but I don't want to step on your toes. Well, part of it, again, is at one time we had, for students who were transitioning to high school who were at risk, we had a block of math and language arts. And that no longer exists there. And through conversations with Jack this year, that's one of the things that we realized, that if we really want to start raising the bar at the high school, that's one of the things that will need to be in place at the freshman level. And so that's.
Are you talking about the teacher who was split between the junior high and the high school, or the new program for freshmen?
I think it's the teacher that was split. So the junior high students that walked across the street to the high school, someone instructed them.
Yes.
A
that was
0.4.
4 or 5 students. So they really rolled into a classroom. It wasn't as if we had the same number of sections.
Okay, so they sit in on the high, but now that there's 30.
Right.
So that teacher really is still teaching her class.
Right.
And now we need another
Right.
0.4 at the junior high. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it, Jack, thanks.
And then the additional for the high school is the freshman math
Right,
program.
got it.
And I have a quick question pertaining to high school as well, and that's the 0.4 FTE for the college readiness. You said that was successful and we want to maintain that. We already have somebody, is it a 0.4 doing that now? Are we adding another 0.4?
We're adding to that, yes.
Okay.
okay, before you sit down, are you done?
Mm-hmm.
Are these, again, we're at the high school, I guess. So are these, this 1.7, is this in addition to what we talked about a couple months ago with the high school? You had come to the board and you were looking for some things. Does this encompass that, or is this in addition to what you had talked about before?
If you take where we're at currently at this time of the year with FTE, we're requesting additional 1.7.
Can I ask that a slightly different way? 'Cause
Yes,
I think-
go ahead.
So,
Do you know what I'm
Jack,
saying?
you came and presented us a variety of curriculum enhancements. And the way I read this is some of those, like the increased requirement in government, some of the things here are part of what you presented us. I think what Marie's asking is the whole 1.7, does it encompass all of those curriculum enhancements that you, of course, enhancements that you came and talked to us about previously? Because
Yes.
there was an FTE associated with that discussion, right? It was just a course discussion?
Yes.
So this isn't in addition to that, this is sort of the FTE impact of the courses you want to offer?
This is out the door, new addition from the current year's level of FTE.
So it includes
So
the courses he
so it
talked
includes
about
everything.
previously?
Okay, I go back a couple months, like October, November, you would come and ask us for something. Does
It
anybody
was the
remember this?
college ready, I know it was the
It
college
was-
readiness.
right, it was the college readiness.
Position.
Okay, so that's in here, or did we already approve that and this is addition?
In addition to?
Right, that's,
This is in addition to what we approved before? Okay.
For
so-
college readiness.
For college readiness.
But all the other things are, like the government and some of that kind of stuff is part of the course enhancements?
Yeah, we approved 1.4 before. What
Yeah.
was the 1.4? It was 1 and then .4.
Well, the
Right.
1.4, the .4 was college readiness. The other one was not a FTE, it was a one position in academic support, which was a TA position.
right, it was
Okay,
a
that's right.
teacher assistant.
That's right, thank you.
That's what I'm getting at. You had come to us and asked for something. I wanted to know if that was in here or if we already approved that. Now we have something new on our plate. Okay.
Something new, right?
Something new. Okay.
Question. Could you elaborate a little bit on the increased requirement in government? What does that mean exactly? Because it's 1.2 FTE, so it must be a substantial increase.
That's an increase in social studies overall, and some of that's offset by a decrease in family and consumer science. So that's not that's part of what's happening there. More students are taking courses in social studies than they are in family and consumer science. So there's a little bit of an offset there. The government accounts for approximately 0.6 or 0.8. If you figure that this is, I don't know how the high school operated in the past, frankly, without having seniors have to take government since it's a state requirement. But now that it's back in the books, because we didn't teach it this year somehow, all seniors have to take it. And so that, if you figure next year approximately 130 students, it's a semester course overall. So there's the increase in about 0.8 FTE, if that makes sense. So there's an increase in social studies due in part to the government requirement.
Right.
The additional increases are that they're choosing social studies electives over family and consumer science.
For selection, right, okay.
Jack, I
Does that
have
make sense or not?
hopefully I have a very easy question to answer. You, as Marie and other people have alluded to, you came to us in September or October, said, I need this. You came to us in February with a need for another employee. Now I'm seeing it, here again, the 1.7. Are we done now, Jack? Are we, do we, I mean, I know it could change because everything could change, but it just seems like there's been a lot of need coming from the high school this year. That's why I'm asking.
Well, actually, if you look at the projections that were originally given by the district, the high school was supposed to receive an additional 2.2 this year based on the numbers that the board had set out. And we're only requesting additional 1.7. So we're actually asking for 0.5 less than the original numbers asked for. And the 1.4, that's kind of misleading because a TA position at 1.0 is nowhere near the same cost as an FTE position.
Right.
The 0.4 in college readiness, which was an additional expense this year and going forward, was offset by almost completely financially by the people we hired in versus the people that were previously there. So that was cost neutral. So if you look at the it's really not 1.4, it's a TA plus 0.4.
Right.
That was accommodated, that entire financial cost of the district was accommodated by the differences in salaries between the people who left and the people we hired in. So that was actually cost neutral to the district. The additional 1.7 that we're requesting is less than the 2.2 that the high school was supposed to be allocated through the guidelines set up by the district and the board. So in my opinion, we're actually doing with 1.5 less. I can explain that again because it's a lot to throw at you. But
I think I got it.
so we're actually asking for less than what we were supposed to get in FTE this year.
My hesitation with that,
Yes.
just to be the fly on the wall, is yes, the district did pay less last year in one building. But like right now, we're having this huge conversation about how to best suit all of our students. So if we found a profit, so to speak, in terms of somebody left we didn't plan on, my frustration is just saying it's cost neutral. Because right now, we're having this intense conversation about, moving from here to here straight without talking about needs. I mean, we are talking about needs, you know what I'm saying? So I know what you're saying is that the high school found some money, so they took it and put it over here, so it's cost neutral. But when we have, retirements in other places, and we're now trying to, for lack of a better term, shift dominoes, I guess I would ask the same question. Have we accommodated, are we now giving the high school what you want should the board approve this 1.7 in addition to what was done before? Does that, you understand what I'm saying?
Are you getting what you need? That's what we're really.
Yes. Yes. We are getting what we need. There won't be any other further requests for FTE.
Okay.
And as I say once again, I think even if you look at the 0.4 we were given this year and not taking into account the differences in salaries, add that to the 1.7, it's still lower than the projection. But if you're asking me, are we going to come back for more FTE? The answer is no. I understand that.
Well, not at this point, but Jack, I mean, to be perfectly frank, if this is really about kids and about education and about outcomes and about things that we need to do. Obviously, we're not, we're in a spot where we have finite and limited resources.
Yes.
We understand that. So, but I think your job isn't just to manage FTE. Your job is to articulate the academic need in your building, I think. Just speaking for me. And, to the extent that there's an FTE conversation within the district, then clearly that's, Kevin and Kim's and then our role to have that conversation. So, I'd encourage you to continue just to articulate the academic need that exists in your building and say it out loud. Hey, look, this is why we need it. So.
And I'll say with these numbers, having the projections that will be good.
Good.
I think jumping on what Dan just mentioned, I would like to just go on record, if we're talking about staffing, manning fifth grade for next year. I absolutely do not believe that we should cut a section at Manning fifth grade level. I'm absolutely on board with being cost neutral. I know the board has a fiduciary responsibility, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that the kids come out of the district whole, educated and, able to succeed, to thrive in the real world. And I would rather see us end the year a little over budget than having kids get through the system without a solid education. I think that's a critical failure on our part. I'm all for cost neutrality, but sometimes you just can't have it. And I think this is a case where we just can't have it. So that's my feeling. I do not want to cut a fifth grade section at Manning.
Okay, if we're going to go on that topic, when you look at what's been presented to us, and yes, obviously we all know that the class size discussion is pretty intense. When I was I guess I feel it's somewhat similar, is that I think one of the directions given was to try to see if we can be cost neutral. And so I thank you and Kim for that and the administrative staff. However, when we now see all this, I don't feel comfortable with that either, because I know for myself that last year, well, we've been talking about class size for a couple years. I feel that when we voted last year to deal with the bubble classes, if you will, at Manning, we were finally in a position to do something about it because we had the domino effect of dealing with the building. So now we had these two big classes. And so especially these two groups, because their whole entire time at elementary school was in these big classes. So when we talked about that before, I had I'm speaking for myself, I had assumed that that was going to carry through for their education. So I agree with you wholeheartedly that this fifth grade class, there's 1.0, obviously they're leaving. We're sending them to the junior high. But it was my understanding that that was going to remain in that same way. I really struggle with taking these kids and giving them a fantastic year that is very similar in numbers only to many of the other students in our district. And now to say, well, you know, it's fifth grade, now we're going to kick it back to there. So, you know, that was my personal intention when we did that last time. Sure. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, the others, I don't feel right now that I have a concern with, because it is something new, and of course everything's a transition. Every you know, this is the first time we're applying guidelines. But from where I sit, especially since you've mentioned a surplus, I am happy from my own perspective to give our junior high and our high school the things that they need, but not with that particular group of kids.
You had a question, Shannon?
I have a question that's not related to that, and then I also have some comments as well. But I just wanted to go back because Mary Kay was asking about the .4 math teacher at the junior high. So previously, we only had a handful of kids that went for geometry. If we now have 30 kids, isn't that a whole section of math?
Yes, it is.
So how come there isn't already a math teacher available? I mean, those 30 kids aren't serviced in the traditional math classes at the 8th grade level, but then shouldn't there be a section of math available? I'm just...
Currently, for the 8th grade level, we have a .6 math teacher there, and that's Miss Barnes, and then she spends .4 of her day over at the high school. And we have, with our incoming 8th grade, for next year's 8th grade class, we have 130 students. And so it's because of that increase in students and, you know, the larger population in our school. It'll be the largest student population in quite some time. It's a pretty big bubble. But it is the biggest.
So there's more 8th graders in general, and there's more that qualify for this, for geometry.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, just trying to figure out, like, if there's a whole class, then there should be a whole teacher, right? But no, it sounds like the student level is going to drive the need in a little bit of a different direction.
So, so seventh grade presently is a bubble, turning into 8th grade next year, right?
Correct, Ed.
5th grade is a bubble, turning into 6th grade next year.
Yes.
6th grade is smallish, though, if I recall correctly.
6th grade, I believe, and I've got a few numbers in my head right now, but I believe we're right around 110.
Okay, so it's sort of average size then. It's a
correct. So we'll have approximately we'll have 360 off of December's data. Yeah. We'll have 360 6th, 7th, and 8th graders next year at the junior high, and then we'll also have some of our students from the deaf and hard of hearing program that'll also be mainstreamed into our classes.
So how about is next year we got 2 bubble classes in your building?
That is correct.
Okay.
We've got a couple bubbles.
Okay.
Okay. That was I just wanted to, it was a good question, but I didn't really understand, so, okay.
Don't want to pop those bubbles.
I have some questions more for John, but if you want to address some of this, and then we can go back.
Well, I was just going to follow up Marie's comment, and I can't, you know, somebody had asked me about the guidelines, and, you know, and it is true, one school of thought is that the guidelines kick in when you need to start making those tough decisions. You know, if you need to reduce staffing because of where you're at financially and those types of things, that's how you make those decisions. I think somebody had, and I guess that is one way to apply them as well. It's just going to offer that out there. But do you have?
So I still had a couple more quick things. Is
On
that?
On
what you said.
John?
No, on what you were talking about and on what Kevin just said.
Okay,
Get a question and then comments.
Okay, can I just follow up with just one thing to finish that up? Well, what's difficult here is because it looks for right now, because there's guidelines, you know, low and high, and it seems like all we're talking about right now is the high end,
right,
which is fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with anything else, because how do you apply the low when it doesn't really? And I had thought that we had a conversation once before that, does it change with one kid or a percentage of kids or whatever, you know? Obviously, this is the first year we're applying, you know, these guidelines, and so we give the you know, to you, give you the permission or whatever to go and look at this and put these things together. And so there's going to be huge differences.
Right.
But it seems like when you look at this, what's in front of us, we are just looking at that top and not the bottom. So as we transition into something, it just, to me, it just felt like, I'll go back to that same thing, that one class just kind of falls in there, because then they're going to be going to the junior high the year after that. So anyway, that's all. Go ahead, Jane.
So a couple of things. You mentioned the idea of grandfathering, which I think is kind of interesting, because wasn't anywhere in sort of the options. I think that's a pretty creative option. One of my concerns about all these changing class sizes is the continuity of the experience of each of the kids, regardless of what the class size is, whether it's 25 or 18, or, I mean, it doesn't matter necessarily, except that if you have kids do kindergarten, first and second grade at one level, and then suddenly third grade, their class is 10 or 15 kids larger, and then, we get to fourth grade again and something happens and they fall back down into the split. It seems to me that from a continuity of a student moving through a building, you know, learning and being accustomed to an environment, there's probably some benefit in, you know, if a kid's in a 21-person class, that there's some similarity. Not this year they're in a 15-person class, and next year they're in a 25-person class. That's a pretty significant difference for a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. So the idea of grandfathering is kind of interesting. It doesn't get us, you know, right now, money or savings or fiscal responsibility, but it certainly gives us an option to provide some continuity in how the kids move through the schools. And I think that can be pretty important for the experience that we're talking about really young kids, right? I mean, we're not talking about junior high and high school. We're talking about really young children. And I think we do have a responsibility to have some continuity in their experience as they move through the building. The second thing is I'll go back because I kind of questioned the guidelines when we had that discussion, and it doesn't seem like we really support the guidelines that we put in place wholeheartedly, and I wonder if it's worth revisiting the guidelines now that we're actually at the point of trying to apply them. You know, we all seem to be in agreement that that's a little bit of a painful application, and perhaps the guidelines are not exactly as we ideally would like to see them. So I'm just going to suggest that there might be an opportunity to revisit that. Now that we've seen what it would actually look like to apply them, are we still in agreement that those really are our idealistic guidelines for class size? So that was my other thought as I listened to all of this, that once you actually have to do it, it sort of changes the whole idea.
You know, in my mind, it's not ideal. These guidelines are not at all ideal. But, you know, in a perfect world, our children would all be in classes with, you know, between 15 and 20, 22 maybe tops, and, you know, that's a perfect world. But we don't live in a perfect world. And I think the recommendations, because these guidelines came from the administration, so, you know, you feel compelled to agree with them. And we did agree with them. We did agree with, you know, we voted, we agreed with them, but the bottom line is, you know, we gave this to them. We gave them a reduced class size last year, and I'm not willing to yank it away from them this year. So, you know, I think the standards or the guidelines can work as long as we treat them as guidelines and not absolutes. You know, but again, it is painful to apply these guidelines. Absolutely. If we could lessen the numbers, that would be beautiful. I would love to see that.
Let me float something out.
You feel like standing up some more, or you want to sit down?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
A couple things in terms of the guidelines. When we did the guidelines, that was kind of an odd timing for our district because of where we're at in the negotiation process. And so my guess is that if we wanted to, take a step back and take another look at it with, teachers and, and putting together some, I don't know necessarily absolutes, but maybe some, some stipulations and some,
broader rubrics.
Yeah, broader rubrics.
That incorporate more than just a number,
Right.
count the number of heads.
My guess is we can do that. But maybe, unless there's significant objection, if going into next year, we, again, reduce the 1 FTE, we can harvest 0.65, I know, being creative. And then, with that commitment then that we'll do everything administrative we can to continue to reduce costs so that the impact of the additional FTE is less significant. We'll come back to the board with either the same guidelines or some guidelines with some additional rubrics attached to that. And then the last piece that I'll say is I think, though, we do have to explore, for instance, do we want to take some time between now and next fall to see how the community feels about, tax rate, those types of things? Do we start having some of those conversations? There are some conversations I think we dance around that maybe we just need to say, hey, let's just pull together some people, let's do some, surveying, some forums, get feedback, input, so that we know, then we'll have an idea, yeah, there is light at the end of the tunnel because we know we're going to get support in this way. Or, you know what, we're going to have to resolve some of these issues ourselves because as much as people support our school district, that's not an option that they're going to support, But that possibly, does that seem?
Well, I guess the one thing that just to follow up on those two things, I believe that a lot of the discussions about class sizes was driven by the teacher-student ratio. And that seems, I don't think there's anybody that disagrees with that. And I think that was why this discussion kept coming up, because of the true inequity in our district, just on that regard, because, they're all going to the same place. But let's just put that aside for a second. It's not truly a question of money. It's not really, we're not trying to get rid of teachers, and we're not trying to double up or, but the truth of the matter is, in the perfect world, yeah, and we had this conversation. It would be great if every class had 15 kids, but we can't afford that. So what do we do? And, I recall those discussions. Of course, everybody can recall their own piece of it. But my thought, or my impression was that we had to come up with something, because it was like shooting fish in a barrel all the time. What do we do with these numbers? And so, again, nothing is absolute, but you have to start somewhere. And that was my impression, is why we did this. Because, again, if it was a perfect world and we had nothing but space, every kid in our district in elementary school would have 15 kids in a class. But we can't. And so I thought we tried to do the best we could to have, because we kept having those conversations. And I do recall that it was voted on. So, yes, over the summer we can certainly look at that. The other piece that I'm frustrated with, you talk about, dancing around these things. One of the things I thought that we did talk about as well was split-level classes. And that is something our district has done, and it can be done with success. I would have loved to have seen some of that presented to us here, because that might have done something with that, but it's not, such as it is. So I feel like we keep dancing around the same question, but the truth is, it'd be great if everybody had small classes. We don't, so we have to do the best with what we can. And I think the decision that we talked about before was, let's talk about these two huge big classes, deal with those two, then we deal with the discussion about class sizes, generic discussions, then we get to here, which I think we were all really looking forward to, so.
Sure. And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Joel.
I guess pretty much I'm in agreement with everything you're presenting here, what Jack wants, what John wants, obviously the early childhood, the full-day kindergarten with some discussion on the tuition. I would, last year when we did vote for that change to go to 4 sections, I anticipated that would be carried through. So I am basically okay with 3 positions out of the 4 that you have on your recommendation. One of the ways I looked at it, because I'm really trying to wrap my head around it, am I being fair? Am I looking at it from the perspective of a Miller parent, from a Miller student, or a Manning parent, or a Manning student? And so I used the guidelines, used the guidelines, and I used the numbers that you provided us this afternoon. And I wanted to look at not just this year, but what if I applied those numbers this year, 2 years ago, and 2 years into the future, what does that look like for the student experience? In other words, how many contact hours really does a student have with an instructor in a classroom? And so I'm just going to put this up here because it'll be easier if I show it rather than try to talk through it. So I basically, and I don't know exactly if these numbers are right, but they're the same and applied for everybody, so they're even. I said, basically, if a student has 5.5 hours of instructional time in any given school day, and there's 180 school days in a year, when you have 26 students in a class, in that given year, each student gets 38 hours of contact with the teacher on an individual basis. And so I was looking at this first chart is what happens if we return to 3 sections of 4th grade at Manning and what the contact hours look like across the grade levels from that 4th grade using the 26, which would be 78 students divided by 3. And then if we had 4 sections, it would be 19 and a half students in each section. And when we go back to 3 sections, you add up all the contact hours from kindergarten through 5th grade, I came up with 241 contact hours for each student. When I looked at keeping it at 4 sections, students get a little bit more, 254. When I look at the guidelines as applied to Miller, we have the 1st grade who had a 1st grade class of 12, or kindergarten of 12, a 1st grade of 12, and now they jump to 24. At the end of theirs, if assuming all this stays the same, that there's no real changes, they have 330 contact hours. And then the current Miller 2nd grade, because they had 3 years with about 12 and a half students in a classroom, they end up with 357. So in my mind, this really seems equitable, fair, and kind of a different way of looking at it than every year we look at it and see who's got what, but to look at it in a broader term across the student's entire elementary experience. And so some of the concerns I know we've always heard is that, the students at Miller, it's a different demographics, and they need additional instructional time. And even in this model, they still are receiving some of that. Certainly not what they would have if we kept everything the way it is, but I don't feel that that's too much to ask, because the class sizes are so small that I really have trouble justifying the expense when we have so many other needs throughout the district. And I've said it before, I feel really strongly that if we get these interventions at the very front end, that a couple years down the road, we're going to get financial dividends by not having to have so many interventions in the upper grades, because our students are going to be better prepared.
So
Dan, did you have?
I just want to make a comment. I'm not sure what classrooms above kindergarten have 12 kids in them. We have first, second, or third grade classrooms that have 12 kids? Because that's not the numbers you've given us. Numbers you've given us are 14 or 15 or...
No, this was before. This was.
Well, I'm just trying, I mean, Joel put up a chart where he calculated hours that none of us have ever seen before. I don't really feel comfortable. Well, I'm just saying, I don't feel completely comfortable with that because you calculated hours based on 12 and a half kids per classroom, but know where we have 12 and a half kids, or 12, or...
You have 25 currently.
It's 12 and a half for 2 sections.
The current first grade is 25 students.
In 2 sections.
And second grade.
So that's 12.5 per section.
I took that same number, went backwards and forward with it, and assuming it was...
So I guess, among the many other issues that the whole, and really this is about, at the board level, what this should be about is about, the policy and about this whole guideline stuff, right? Because, just as an example, Miller, and we remarked about the IASB speech given by this keynote speaker that talked about things like ignore poverty at your peril. And ignore language barriers at your peril. So, it's one thing to have, for instance, 2.5% ESL learners in a grade level. It's quite another to have 36% as ESLs. It's one thing to have 4% mobility. It's quite another to have 21% mobility. Kids in and out, transient kids that you have to deal with. There's a yawning and growing gap, not just in sort of the nature of the demographics that are unfolding in front of us. Twice the low income in Miller, 4 times the limited English, 5 times the mobility. There is presently, last year, based on ISATs, there is a growing and yawning gap in ISAT performance at every grade level. And it's growing. It's growing. One of my biggest concerns, first off, early childhood is an easy yes. My 2 biggest concerns, and fondest prayers, are that that Linda and her staff can really handle the kids who were outplaced, who we're bringing back in, because those are kids with with some needs. And so, my fondest prayer is that goes well. My next fondest prayer with respect to the early childhood is really just that we don't just reach the parents who are already wildly invested in their children's educations, but the ones that are struggling to make ends meet, and the ones who may not be paying attention, and the ones, because you shared an article with us about the fact that research is beginning to demonstrate that early childhood, while it has a remarked benefit to the kids who participate in it, it is creating, again, it's exacerbating or making worse the gap between the achievement gap between impoverished kids and not impoverished kids. So the early childhood piece is easy. The all-day kindergarten piece is easy. The conversation about fees, I think, is a fair conversation. Staffing at the junior high and senior high, again, is fairly straightforward. The real issue that we're struggling, I think, with is this question of, do we try, certainly for next year, to squeeze that FTE that we want to get at the junior high and senior high out of the elementary? Clearly, it was fairly straightforward for me to see that nobody was going to want to countenance the notion of taking that current 4th grade class and then reducing it by a section when they already had 4 sections. I mean, so that part was fairly easy. Although I'll observe, it's interesting to me that we set a guideline of 28. And I said out loud when I put it against the guidelines that 28 was horrifying when we looked at it in real life. And so 28 is still horrifying, and that's not, the number taking down the section doesn't even get to 28, it gets to 26. So another way of saying that, the fourth grade 4 sections at Manning is a fairly straightforward conversation for me. The argument at Miller with respect to reducing those 2 sections, part of what's advanced is, oh, well, there's going to be support at the early childhood, pre-K, and all-day K. But those kids didn't get that. Getting back to Shannon's point about continuity of experience. And in particular, those kids, have substantially higher low incomes, which generally means single-parent households, substantially higher ESL, which creates a whole different set of issues. It creates issues not just for the kids and the parents, it creates substantial issues for our teachers who have to deal with those challenges, and those challenges are especially real. So, short answer, Kevin, I think I'd love to see us have a robust, or this board and this district have a robust conversation about how to incorporate more rubrics in the class size policies, right, and in the guidelines, because a class of 2% ESLs and 7% IEPs is not the same as a classroom with 12.5% IEPs and 36% ESLs. It's just not the same. So I think you should do that. As to effectively your revised proposal, at 1.65, which is basically it's just reducing the 1 section or the 1 FTE at the 4th grade level at Manning and then finding savings elsewhere. I'm fine with that. I mean, I think that that's a reasonable approach for next year. On the longer-term basis, just to say it out loud, on a longer-term basis, this board and this community is going to have to make some choices. We want neighborhood schools, which creates some interesting class size imbalances. There's some challenges with respect to demographics as well. We want all-day kindergarten. We want expanded early childhood. We want well-paid teachers. We want foreign language at the junior high. We want small class sizes in the grade schools. We want summer school enrichment. We want to work with the village on things like a downtown TIF. What we haven't talked about or dealt with really are coming federal cuts, coming state cuts, SACID revenue down $50,000 a year, sort of in perpetuity going forward, not just one time, but going forward. Growth in our salaries exceeding growth in our revenues, certainly for the next 3 to 4 years. TIF impacts any sort of new revenue we're going to give up. And it's one thing to talk about looking at fees and class sizes to fix all our problems, to balance that thing between what we want and the challenges we face. But you're absolutely right. At some point, we're going to have to face real hard questions, which is the answer revenue? If we want excellence in our schools, it's not free, and you can't just shuffle the chairs around. Not if we're going to add all this stuff. So, the short version of that is I'm good with 1.65 as you presented it, here tonight.
Just a couple of follow-up. I think there's a little different difference between when you use the word poverty and you use low income. I mean, I don't know. The poverty certainly implies a much lower low income than when you say low income to qualify for free and reduced lunch. Early childhood has served our entire district all the time we've had it. So students at both Miller and Manning participate in that. The SACID piece that we lost this year, I don't know that we can say it's not coming back ever.
Well, I think it's
down, their enrollments are down, and they've...
Yeah, I don't see it in the next couple years.
Mm-hmm. So, but that's based on their needs, and then they work with the districts they need space from. And the other piece that I was thinking of is a couple of years ago when we couldn't do anything for students at Manning who were in these overcrowded classrooms, we did add an extra instructional aide, and that is always a possibility, and possibly instructional aid, some sort of bilingual instructional aid, if that's a concern. I mean, that's based on whatever the need is in the building, but if you run into that, we can always bring in some additional resources that way if we did choose to reduce 2 positions at Miller and bolster it like we did before at Manning through the use of instructional aids. I guess that's all I have to say.
Just for my own 2 cents, I personally have experienced a student in my own home who's gone from a small class that got doubled one year, and it was difficult. It was difficult on her to go from that smaller class, kind of like being an only child and suddenly being in a room of 20. It was hard. I've also experienced in my own household a student who's had to learn English on the fly, and it's not easy. It's a struggle at any age. I support the continuity in the classrooms, as you recommended with grandfathering in. I also support the change or the addition of the early childhood program, and I look forward to the kindergarten conversation.
I think, I'm sorry, Gary. I think the administrative staff has done yeoman's work, staying on budget, keeping us in the black. Really great job. But in my opinion, my sense is that we cannot continue to benefit some to the detriment of others. We just can't continue always to remain cost neutral because it's too high a cost to the students.
I'll be honest, we've been throwing around a lot of numbers here. I'm not sure we're anywhere on where we're supposed to be with our staffing. What direction we're actually going here. I can't say, obviously, I do agree that there needs to be a larger conversation with the community about money and so forth, but we need to talk about the here and now in September, okay? I mean, just a little history. I'll say I've been following this since 2007, and since 2007, back then, we were supposed to be broke by 2013. Well, we're coming off a couple of back-to-back years of slight surplus budget, so that's congratulations to Kim and Ken, or Kim and Kevin. So, obviously, I am in full support. I believe that the students that are in the current 4th grade going into 5th grade, that they need that extra class size or the extra section for next year. I know I'm going to upset a few parents here with this, but I don't think that as I look at class sizes at 12, I don't think that's a responsible way to spend money in a classroom. I'm sorry, I'm going to say that out loud, as other people like to say, but I definitely have some difficulty there. I'm not saying I would never do it, but I definitely have some difficulty there. We need to come up with a grand total of 5.5 FTEs is what I'm seeing in this plan, including the kindergarten. We're talking about the tuition for the kindergarten, helping offset some of that cost, but we need to come up with 5.5. That's the number, okay? And I'm looking at 3 right there, and then 2.5 would be left, and we'll recoup some of the money through the reduced tuition of the kindergarten. But I agree with Mary Kay. We're probably just going to have to, at least for next year, agree to pay for 0.65 or 1.5 or whatever the exact number is to accommodate everything that I'm looking at here in front of me. That's what I believe.
I actually, since I have to do, I actually kind of have a plan that I wanted to run by, but I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things for myself. I think, the conversation is never easy when you're dealing with class sizes, but I think one of the things we talked about was, and I will also use that continuity, is it equitable to have students go through their entire elementary experience at 12 and 13, or even, 17, and then get to the junior high, and before tonight, some of these classes had 30. And it always goes back to that teacher-student ratio. And again, I think, I don't want to dredge up those conversations, but I think we truly talked about that the ESL or low income does not necessarily mean that those students can't learn. I know firsthand of some students who excel and they fall into those categories. And we have to remember that some of these kids, you can't just label with one label. They might have a number of them. Doesn't necessarily translate to that they can't learn. But I think the driving force of these conversations about guidelines were, are we doing a disservice to some of our students to continue to have 30 or 28, 29 in a class, when if we're talking about equity throughout the building, kind of came up with our, not kind of, it did come up with our facilities plan, that we have to be equitable across the board. So that I again will say, I believe that's what drove a lot of the conversations for class sizes. So anyway, so I think we still have some questions for John. But one thing that I was thinking of doing is, I have a great big piece of paper here and big pencil, is to say, do we agree that, let's just break this up? Do we start with start backwards or forwards in terms of, I think we're hearing that everybody here agrees that the two secondary schools would get theirs. Then the next question would be, from where?
Can we have, just as a suggestion, or you throw it out and how you do with it, but why don't we have Kevin sort of reiterate his proposal at this point to the board in whole, and then, sort of take the conversation from there.
Right.
And before we vote, though, I think there's still some more questions. So, yes, I'm...
Right. And this is kind of where, the question I posed to the board. And this is assuming that we increase the FTE, the 1.7 at the high school, the 2.3 at the junior high. And with the understanding, and the caveat is that, we, again, ask some tough questions of our community, of our board, before next fall, to help us understand what we're going to need to do with staffing. But basically, at this juncture, if we do the 1 FTE, which is the natural fall off, and then the 0.65 that we're able to find through how we hire, and for next year, leave it at that, the 1.65. That was what was posed to the board.
I just want to, so are we leaving the sections at Manning as projected for at Miller for 2013-14, or are we changing that projection with what you're saying here? Because right now we're saying that it's going to be 1 section of second grade and 1 section of third grade. So are you saying that we're going to have 2 sections of each of those, or are we sticking with
right? That in order, the 1.65, what that means is we don't touch any sections at Manning, and we don't touch any sections at Miller.
Other than the one obvious
right, the one which
right,
is the students moving into the junior high. So that is, is there consensus among the board for that, the 1.65? So you would still have, at Manning, basically what that translates into is 1 through 4 are 3 sections, and then next year's 5th grade 4 sections. And then at Miller, it'd be 1 through 5, 2 sections. That's the 1.65.
So we have 1.65 or 4.65 as presented here in front of the board, or 3.65. Am I right?
Right. Right. I mean,
because the 0.65 is there.
Right. The 0.65, that is us just looking at things and seeing, because I anticipated that the 4.0 wasn't necessarily going to be popular. So the 0.65 is FTE that we can get just from our hiring practices and doing some things. So then the question becomes, you're right, you can get up to an additional 4.65. To get to 4.65, that means next year's 5th grade at Manning has 3 sections. And that means that next year's 2nd grade is 1 section at Miller, and next year's 3rd grade is 1 section at Miller. That gets you to 4.65. If you do 3.65, well then, that means either you're leaving Manning alone in 5th grade and taking two more sections from Miller, or you're doing the one section, I mean, you can do that, 1 and 1, and that gets you to 3.65. 2.65 would be, one of those grade levels at Miller and or I guess the grade level at Manning. So,
I still have an issue with 12.5 kids in a classroom.
Yeah, I guess that's, to me,
One-third
I
of them
feel.
speak Spanish.
I still have an issue with 12.5 kids in a classroom.
I guess the thing is, Kevin, what we have to do is, we have to really focus in here. So what we have in front of us are guidelines. And I will say, too, nowhere in there does it say that the floor is 12. So, I mean, I guess we have to say this. We can't just keep dancing around this. We can't just keep saying 12 is okay unless we have the money to find 12 for everybody else. It's not about, taking anything from somebody. If we can give everybody 12, let's give everybody 12. So I think if we're going to, we have guidelines, the board had many discussions on it, we voted on it, let's move forward and apply them. So when we do that, what you have given us here is 4.0.
right.
So the question is, do we follow the 4.0 or some other version of that?
Right.
So when I was saying the 1.65, I was going with, as Dan has suggested, 1 at Manning and nothing at Miller, and they're 6.5 no matter what.
Right.
3.65 is, I hate to keep doing this, a reduction of 1 at Manning and a reduction of 2 at Miller, because that's what's in front of us. And 4.65 is a reduction of 2 at Manning and 2 at Miller plus 6.5. Let me just ask, does that, I will ask if everybody understands those 3 things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Based on what we have in front of us?
There's a
Okay.
third one at 2.65 as well that you didn't touch, but, yeah.
Okay, what's 2.65?
Oh, right, that would be 1 and 1 plus the 6.5.
Which?
One section at Manning, 1 section at Miller, and then the 0.65.
So what, when you say 1 section at Miller, which one?
I mean, Kevin, at this point, you've recommended just going forward with 1.65, and whatever we do to these kids, we do to ourselves, because they got to get their way to the junior high and the high school. So, have at it, man. There's a yawning gap. It's only going to get bigger.
What we have in front of us is 4.0, but I'm hearing.
The recommendation that we really came to the table with was 4.0.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Kevin's offered a couple of different scenarios.
Right.
One was the 1.65 version. I have already said what I would want would be the 3.65 version, leaving the 4 sections at Manning for 5th grade next year, 1 position from Manning that falls off the charts, and 2 from Miller, with a caveat that based on class makeup at Miller next year, if you need additional instructional services, that you work with teaching assistants to help fill that, rather than have extra sections.
Because again, Kevin, you cannot, at the start of the school year, if these numbers change and it drops off, I just want to hear you say this, we cannot reduce staff then.
Right.
However, we can add to staff in September.
Right.
If these numbers increase and we need additional, whether it's aides or an additional, we can add to staff in September, but we cannot reduce.
Right.
Which is why, correct me if I'm wrong, that the yearly calendar states that we have these difficult conversations about staffing. Okay, so let me ask.
Maria, I have one question.
Yes.
Kevin, I'm very unclear on how, I guess it's not really a Kevin question, it's really a question for people at the board table, how the proposed 26 kids per class in 5th grade at Manning is not okay, but the proposed 25 kids per class at Miller in 2nd and 3rd grade is okay. I'm just confused on how you apply that rule differently. I mean, we either apply the guidelines or we don't apply the guidelines, and I think this suggestion that we apply them differently at this juncture really brings a lot of additional things into question that we maybe don't really want to have brought into question about how we manage the district and how buildings are looked at and some of those kinds of things that aren't so positive. So I think my question, generally speaking, if we're really talking about 3.65, I have some real serious concerns about why 25 kids per class is okay in 2 grades in one building, but 26 kids per class isn't okay in an older grade at a different building. I really don't understand.
You know, I think in my mind, Shannon, it's a matter of the fact that these kids have always had major classes, big classes, 30, 29, 30, 31, and now they've been given 1 year with smaller class sizes. Why can't they keep that for their last year at Manning?
And actually, I support the 1.65 because I think the grandfathering notion and the 1.65 is a fairly reasonable thing that we can apply across the board without calling some of these other sort of negative things into question. I just guess I have to say out loud, I think applying the rule differently in the different buildings is, I don't understand how that's even an option. I mean...
I look at it, I guess, from the opposite number, Shannon. If you take the numbers at Manning and you give us the extra class size, that gives us class sizes of about 20, okay? 20 is a very reasonable number to educate 20 kids in a classroom. I think when you apply the same theory to the second and third grade at Miller, and you get down to that 12 number, I'm sorry, that's my disconnect. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Why is the high-end number not acceptable, okay? Well, how is 12 in a classroom for, acceptable for the grade levels? Okay, well, that's all. I mean, I understand. I'm just giving you how I came up with my point of view on it.
I think that's a question that we have to really consider. We also haven't considered some of the other factors of the challenges, and we can try and make it look like ESL or low income or transients doesn't have an impact, but I mean all the studies show it does. So it's not about whether a kid who has money can learn or not and a kid who doesn't have money can learn or not. It's just about decades of studies that have been done that show those 3 factors play a role in the success in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And we haven't considered those in our guidelines. And I agree, 12 and a half, 13, I mean, those are kind of low numbers that we should consider. I think Marie mentioned a little bit earlier about combining, grades to change class. Well, we've never had a discussion about grade levels where all the grades could be evened out and all of our kids could have continuity and a similar experience as they move through the district. I mean, that's never come up and been discussed and vetted and all those things either. So, I mean, there are other options that we really haven't reasonably considered in addition to the idea of, is there additional revenue that helps support 15 or 16 or 18 across the board in all the buildings? I think the low number is certainly something we should question. I also think, though, as a board, shouldn't we be striving to get the low, two low numbers? I mean, 12's a little thin, but 15 or 16 or 18. I mean, that's something. If we as a district could figure out how to do that, it seems like that should be our goal. We shouldn't be bickering over 26 or 25 or whatever. We should really be talking about educationally, what do we want to provide, and how do we do that in the most smooth and continuous way possible, so that these young kids have the best educational experience that they can have. And I just think applying this rule differently in 2 different buildings just brings up a lot of questions that are really not questions I would ever want to have to answer.
Shannon, I have to agree with you. I have to agree with you on a number of things, and that obviously, you can't make all these decisions in one night. I think that we have been talking about these things. We have been talking about overcrowding at Manning. So we have moved forward with, facility issues, which allow for the expansion. I mean, we now are able to even discuss all-day kindergarten and early childhood expansion because of the number of years that went into making those discussions to make those things possible. And I think one of the things that, as far as what I feel, is one of the things that drove the question about class sizes was the inequity. Now, I do know, and Kevin, I don't know if I certainly don't want to put you on the spot, but there has already been a survey out there. And so based on a survey, again, a snapshot or a discussion, so far what we've heard from our discussion with our community is that people want neighborhood schools. Now, I agree with you that we need to have further discussions as to additional revenue, different questions about how do we, what do we do about it. But I think at this point, we can only deal with what we have in front of us. And what we've had in front of us for particularly this 4th and 5th grade class right now at Manning is these kids have had these huge, huge numbers the whole time. And it's wonderful. I totally agree with what you're saying, Shannon, and that there is value into having small classes. And as far as I'm concerned, that's why I voted for these 2 classes to finally get some relief. And when we're talking about next year, whether this class, next year's 5th grade, we're not talking about taking them down to even 15. We're taking them down to 20. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about this, nobody is saying, at least I feel this, that nobody is saying that there's any wrong being done any one group of children. I think what the driving question was throughout was, can we educate our students and have them ready for junior high or such? If there is this big difference, and again, we never had the availability to put these big bubble classes anywhere. There was no space. So finally, when we got it, well, now we can do something about it. And the first year that it happened, it wasn't even giving teachers, it was curriculum aides. And that, I think, was a success. But then when we finally talked about, let's take and give these 2 sections 4 sections apiece. So it's not necessarily taking something from one student, and that troubles me the most. That troubles me the most, in that there's some negative connotation of taking something away, because it's not, as far as I feel. It's just, if we can sit here and have a conversation that everybody gets 12, then let's have it. But, so that's.
We're also in a position right now that we need to find resources to apply toward the junior high and the high school. So we weren't in this position last year. We're in this position this year. And we have resources that we're paying for, and we're paying these resources to teach 12.5 kids. And I think it makes perfect sense to double up the class.
Well, I certainly just respectfully disagree, and I think Dan made a point about test scores and what we're trying to achieve from an educational perspective, and doubling a class size for a 7-year-old who is already behind from an achievement perspective on standardized testing. I just don't see what that accomplishes, and I just abjectly cannot support that notion. And if it's good enough for one grade in one building, then it should be good enough for all of our elementary students, and we should be striving to provide the best education. And we do already have standardized testing achievement gaps, and if we continue to make or to suggest this type of change in the middle of 5 or 6 years of school, 3 years in, we're suddenly going to double your class size when you're 7 or 8. I really think that the potential negative effects for those classes are significant. And I just want to say out loud, and for God and country, that I just vehemently oppose the notion of doubling a class size, kind of, here we are, and not really seriously considering how that affects those children who've already had 3 years of an experience in one type of environment. Now, bam, we're going to double it and cross our fingers and hope for good things. And I don't support that.
I think it's absolutely punitive to the neediest kids in our district, so.
I didn't hear you, Dan.
I think it's absolutely punitive to the neediest kids in our district.
I just, I have to add one piece here. It wasn't but maybe 2 or 3 years ago that we were trumpeting the fantastic test scores at Miller School, 100% meets and exceeds in mathematics. So I think there's a lot of variability, primarily, because the classes are small. You know, you have 25 kids, you're drawing averages, and...
Well, 2 years ago, there was 2% mobility at Miller. 3 years ago, there was 2% mobility at Miller because we were in the depths of a housing crisis. 2 years ago, there was 12% mobility at Miller. This past year, there was 21% mobility at Miller. And I guarantee you that this year is going to be in that neighborhood or higher. I mean, the challenges changed. The kids changed. Markedly. Markedly. Those kids need resources, and they can learn, but they need resources to learn. Anyway, I'm sorry.
I guess I'll...
I think, I made my point. I mean, I think we're offering additional resources if it's academically needed through, and this could be for 1 year. I mean, the class sizes might go up and they might get split again and they'll be back, we just don't know.
I guess I'll just throw this suggestion out there, even though I know we've been talking about this for a long time, but at some point, the board has to give direction to Kevin as to what we're doing, okay? And a couple of years ago, when we first were dealing with these issues at Manning, we brought extra aides into the classrooms, okay? Now, I don't want to call it an aide. Let's call it a full-time educator. If we have the sections as projected, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, okay, and then go to the 2.65, as Dan had suggested, we could then have an extra full-time educator for each of that second and third grade classroom, not an aide, an actual full-time educator to help reduce the change, reduce the opposite of continuity. I can't think of the word right now, but that way I think if we have 3 teachers over 2 class sizes, that could help, and maybe we determine that it's a special needs teacher, maybe it's an ESL teacher, whatever it needs to be to help those 2 classes. That's better than what we did a couple years ago, and it still helps the budget because we're still going to find an extra full-time educator. We're still going to be spending more than we want to next year, no matter what we do, because we want to give the junior high and the high school everything that they need. I don't want to fight over one full-time educator here. I think that's wrong of us, and we have to give him some direction, and I think that's, in my opinion, the common ground area, to make sure that second and third grade classroom has an extra full-time educator split between both of them. It helps in the fact that we're not saying it's 12 kids in a classroom, okay? And it's not just a teacher's aide. No offense to teacher's aide. They're great people. Nobody get mad at me, but a full-time educator in the classroom.
For the record, I did not suggest 2.65.
Well, you threw the number out, that's all.
Because it was one of the options.
Okay, that's fine.
But I did not suggest it. Kevin's recommending 1.65 at this point.
Okay, I just want to follow up on that. One of the things that was done a couple years ago were curriculum aids.
Right.
Is that, so I guess the question is, if we have a surplus, could we get a curriculum aid for these 2 classes? And it can be similar to what was done at Manning before there was any space, and that you have a teacher, and maybe that's what you're saying?
Right.
That you have a teacher that can do pull-out and have one-on-one with the students. So, okay, are we?
I don't know where we're at.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to that.
I think we're not at 1.65.
Right, so I guess the question is.
Well, then the question, Gary had suggested 2.65. Or I think somebody had 3.65. So the question is what we can get consensus on.
Okay. I'm still at 3.65 with my caveat.
I concur. I am at 3.65 with the teachers, additional teachers or teaching aides in the classroom, preferably teachers.
I guess I would leave that, evaluate that. If you think a full-time teacher or some other, that's kind of a secondary recommendation to bring back, maybe that would be a way to handle that. But I would say 3.65 and then explore additional needs and where they're at.
I would like to add too, Kevin, that if these numbers change, over the course of the summer and all of a sudden it looks as though it's going to have to be split, we need to revisit it then.
Sure.
Because registration's July and August, so you might know. Because I just want to reiterate something that you said that was, I think, very important. We can't decrease staff, but we can add.
Right.
So.
That was one of the caveats of the guidelines, was that after registration, the numbers would be reviewed in case there isn't, and you can reduce, but there is the opportunity to
Increase
split.
staff.
Okay, on that regard, then I would agree, and I can support 3.65 with also giving direction to you and your administrators to work on curriculum aids or curriculum, whatever you feel is necessary.
Shannon?
I could compromise with the 2.65. I still think that we need to make sure that that the building and the staff and, it's what they need to. Because I'm not an educator, I don't know.
I personally think this is devastating for the teachers and the kids at Miller and their families, and I support 1.65 as you recommend.
I don't support applying the guidelines differently, and I do not support doubling the class size of 7 and 8-year-olds. I think the 1.65 and looking for other options is a better plan until we really come to grips with what we want our guidelines to be.
Gary, I didn't get yours. I'm sorry, maybe you didn't say it.
Well, I was trying to just find some common ground to, give Kevin some better direction, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I'm going to support 3.65.
Okay, so before we move on with that, can I ask junior high?
Sure.
Now, I know, okay, let's back up, because since did everyone ask their questions of Jack? Okay, so I guess before we do a vote, can everyone tell me yes if you agree to 1.7 at the high school?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're all in agreement on that? Am I 7 on that? Okay. Okay, and then I know there's still some questions for the junior high.
Sure.
So do you want to, can you talk to us? And since I said that, maybe I'll ask you first. So can I, you talked to us last time, and there was a blizzard, and it was your birthday. So can you talk a little bit about what it is, this balanced class sizes and things like that, and that gives you your thing. And then I guess the second question is, and I'll borrow something that Mary Kay said, does 2.3 give you really what you need to educate our junior high kids?
Yes, yes, it does. So there's a few things there, and Kevin broke it down. The 1.0 literacy will definitely bring down our class sizes specifically for literacy. So there's that. And then with the couple of bubbles that I mentioned before, we'll be able to, with the 0.4, with the math teacher, that'll help. Obviously, when you're talking about programming, you first start talking about the social studies, science, math, and literacy, but then also you need to be able to balance that with your exploratories, your PE. So the rest of that FTE will support that as well. There's approximately 3 schedules that I'm looking at right now. I do have copies of them. I can give them to you. And it goes through the different rationale depending on what you do. But the core emphasis of the different scheduling changes are that currently right now, because of our schedule and because of our current programming, that there's not a lot of flexibility, and it leads to imbalance of class sizes, some class sizes that are 30 plus and some class sizes that are 4 or 5. And we have no way in order to shift that because of the programming that we currently have. That class size of 4 or 5 has changed over the last few months with people moving in or people moving out, but we are locked into it, and we've tried many different things to compensate for that, but it's because of the programming that we have. With the bubbles, the class sizes will, for social studies, science, and math, it depends on the grade level, because we have anywhere from class sizes of 110, and I'm talking about overall class sizes, populations, 110, 120, and then 130 with the 8th grade. And so in order to, when we're looking at the schedule, we're looking at class sizes, depending on which grade level, for 5 sections of social studies, science, and math, ranging anywhere from 22 to 26, 8th grade being 26. The cornerstone of creating a new schedule, besides of a little bit more fluid movement for students and balanced class sizes, is also having an intervention or enrichment type period. And I know that there are a lot of concerns from some of you about, currently we have two exploratory classes or options, and then we have 1 PE class as well. We've been working real hard, but I've taken out many pencils. I've called more individuals that are in the area, and I've got a few different options here. Really, I need to know that I have the staffing in order to do it, to be able to move forward with that. But I have a packet so you can look through that, and then I would field any kind of questions that you might have. So I guess if you want to have some focused questions, I can answer some of those things.
I guess my questions just basically are, our role is to give you the resources you need to deal with the issues that you've alluded to and that we've all talked about for a couple years, and that these inequitable class sizes, and you've got these big ones and these small ones. So my question is twofold. Number one, these 2.3 that you're looking for, and I think you just answered it, gives you that.
Yes, it does.
Right? It gives you that.
And it also puts the supports in place so that we would be able to move forward and continue to professionally develop our teachers, have co-teaching going on, integrating technology into the curriculum, quite a few things. And there's quite a bit. I didn't mean to inundate you with a lot of information. I just figured it'd be better to give more rather than less this time.
Well, and so I guess the last thing that I would say, again, because it's not our job to ask you who's going to go where and when and how and everything. But I would say that, I know that you guys have been, all of the administrators have been working really hard to deal with these. And so my question would be, is just because I know I'm going to get 10 questions. Do you have in your plan somewhere that how you will roll this out to the families before the fall?
Yes, and I was mentioning this to my PTO last week. My goal, once I have, once the staffing is approved and I come together, I'm actually meeting with my team leaders tomorrow, my department heads tomorrow, and wanting to put their heads together, because they're so much smarter than I am when we put our heads together, and to determine what we can do to make this work the very best way that it can work. So once we do that, I get the go-ahead with staffing, I start getting the right people in the right places. My goal is to be meeting with not only the 5th grade parents, incoming 6th grade parents, but individually meeting with the 7th and the incoming, I should say, 7th and 8th grade parents as well, so individually. So, and by individually, I mean sets of parents, so that I can address concerns and making that an evening so that we can address concerns. Because obviously, when we're talking about doing some program changes with math because of implementing the Common Core curriculum, there's some math program changes there, and so I want to make sure that everybody's aware that we started our students out where we're currently at one way, and we want to finish that out accordingly.
Okay, that was my main concern last time, and I should have, last time when we were working about time, I should have first of all said thank you for bringing to us what you did. And then the second step being, if we give you what you need, just to make sure that that piece is out there for the parents so that they know what you're doing. Because I think
Absolutely.
there's a lot of people excited about this.
I think that the communication, especially when you start changing things from what traditionally has been done, I believe that communication is going to be the key.
That's all I have.
Forgive me for laughing. I struggled with this. This brought me back, way back.
I can send you an e-copy as long as you promise not to forward it.
Thanks.
And I put it on blue paper so you could squint a little bit more, too.
Great. Okay, I didn't know if anyone else had questions.
No.
Okay, so that was just my question. If we give you what you need, is that going to make them?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, so can we then say that, are we in agreement, the 2.3 for the junior high as?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody? Okay.
Well, the last piece.
Did you want to sit down, Kevin?
Yeah.
No, I'm fine.
We have two.
It's easier to have a discussion this way, actually.
We have two action items.
Right.
So do you want to do that? And then I think there were still some kindergarten.
Well, isn't one of the,
Cost of kindergarten.
So no, we haven't had the discussion about, well, all we've talked about so far is just the elementary, junior high, and high school.
right.
Did you have another element in mind? Because basically we say just approve staffing. So is there
Right.
some other piece to that?
No, that would be, that's the staffing conversation, right?
But what about kindergarten? Because you're looking for people there. Are you, because that's another question. That's
Right,
another
right.
action item.
That's another action item. And for the kindergarten, the only thing, and I think maybe just for expediency, I think the question that we just need to answer tonight is an all-day tuition-based kindergarten program. That's what I'm seeking approval on. The tuition piece, we can come back. We also have to have a discussion. We're a little bit behind, but a discussion on fees for next year. And that could be part of that fee discussion, a fee for kindergarten, and come to the board. So tonight, we could just move forward with the, if we have consensus that a tuition-based all-day kindergarten program with the understanding, take a look at the tuition and come back with a recommendation what that should look like.
The only question I have on that is our next school board meeting is April 16th.
Right.
And you've got kindergarten registration starting on the 15th. So how do you, because it sounds like, just from before, that there's a
Right.
discussion. So, for lack of just, while we're, do you want to throw numbers out?
Marie,
Well,
I just have one, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
do we have a projection yet for next year's kindergarten? Like, just a general idea of what we think the numbers are going to be?
We think, based upon enrollment projections, we should be about the same.
Same as?
So roughly about 86, I think, is the number. So we should be about the same. And even next, the week of April 15th, we'll get some of the families, but, and we'll have a better idea, but typically it's after registration that you have a really good idea. And even when we start that first day of school, you have a couple families as well. So, we're basing our numbers on running about 80 to 86 students in a kindergarten program.
I guess my question goes to, if we're gonna do this great thing, all-day kindergarten that we've been talking about for a long time, don't we need to start really advertising that and telling people that we're doing this fabulous thing? And how can we have kindergarten registration? I'm just saying without the full. So I'm just wondering, do you want to throw some numbers out there tonight and see how that flies? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, if I have a kindergartner, I'm trying to figure out where they're going to go in.
Right.
And same thing with early childhood.
Right.
And that's all happening now. So how do we do that if we don't have that conversation tonight?
You know, backing out, 80 kids brings us to $1,600 per family if we had 80 kids in the program. I mean, if you're looking at the 128.5.
Right, and that's if 100%.
Correct,
Right.
which we know they won't.
Right.
You know, I'm not at all comfortable with these numbers. I know that they're pulled from our surrounding area, that we're not. So, you know, I think my ceiling, Kevin, honestly, Kim, my ceiling would be 1,200.
Okay, I'm going to write this down. Okay, just.
It doesn't really mean anything.
I know, we have to, I mean, how are we going to do this?
And again, the rationale with the number was trying to get as close to a break-even program as possible. And I think when I first talked about the all-day kindergarten, you know, if the board, you know, is willing to absorb some of that cost, then yes, we can look at a lower, you know, tuition for that. But with probably the reality is that we'll absorb some of the cost.
Okay, at the risk of just, Gary?
Well, I had said it before, I just want to get as many kids into the program as possible so it doesn't create the education gap that I fear will happen. I'm somewhere between $500 and $900. If I have to put a ceiling on it, I would say $900 to $100 a month. I think people would justify that very well and sign their kids up for all-day kindergarten.
Gary, can you repeat that? Did you say $900 a month?
No, 900, about 100 a month.
Roughly about $100.
I'm a little tired. I don't feel very well. So
$900
okay.
for the year, and, you know, figuring it'd be about $100 a month.
Just want to make sure I heard you correctly, that's all.
I would go ahead and say I'm probably a little more comfortable towards 1,200 than 900, but I could go a little lower.
Do we know how many of our kindergartners currently go to preschool?
No, I don't think we have. Yeah, I don't think we've ever asked that question.
I mean, at preschool, I'm paying more than $900 a year.
Right.
I was thinking even childcare. If you're paying $10 an hour, $3 a day for 180 days, that's like almost $5,500 bucks. So if we were charging them $2,000 for full-day kindergarten, you're saving them half and then some if you're just paying $10 an hour in childcare, which some people pay more, some people pay a little less, but I just kind of picked $10 because it was easy to calculate.
So
you know, but at 3 hours a day, 180 days of school, is that right? I just was using your numbers, so but I mean, if it's a little less, then the number's a little less. I just picked 180 because that was what I remembered from your, so, you know, you figure parents who pay for childcare and recognizing that some don't, the kids go to family or whatever, but for parents that are paying for childcare at $10 an hour, that's $5,400 for the school year. I think $2,000 tuition for an educational program is very reasonable. I think full-day kindergarten, if we have families that send kids to private school, which we do, you know, that's $10,000 a year for full-day kindergarten for the school year. So I don't think $2,000 is a stretch at all. I don't really think the numbers you proposed are a stretch, but considering our economic conditions are different than our neighbors, generally speaking, if we came in a little bit lower than our neighbors, it would be appropriate for the economic conditions in our particular district. I still think $2,000 is a hell of a deal for full-day kindergarten. And also considering that our lowest income families would have reduced or potentially be exempt from those fees due to their economic conditions. So it's not a flat rate across the board, it's scaled based on, you know, ability to pay.
Can I just interject with one thing there? And that's only that we have to consider after-school care, because, you know, all-day kindergarten, really, the reality is it doesn't go all day. There may be before-school care that they have to pay for, after-school care that they have to pay for. I'm still paying $3,000 a year for after-school care.
You know, I just did the rough numbers based on 3 hours.
Right.
If you paid $10 per hour for 3 hours, 180 days, you know what I mean? I didn't consider the other times that are outside.
Right.
I just figured we're giving them 3 hours of care that, or, you know, education in place of childcare.
And I completely agree with that, but you just have to consider that, if they're paying $3,000 on the back end, $3,000 or $2,000 on the front end, that's $5,000 right there on top of now what they're paying for all-day kindergarten. If in fact, it's a working family that has to do the before and after school care. Just a thought.
So Shannon, you say your ceiling's 2,000?
I don't think it's my ceiling, I think it's my number.
Okay.
I mean, I'm willing to go higher, but I think my number is, I think reasonably, considering all the factors at play, I think 2,000 is a pretty reasonable number.
Can I just off of, we had proposed, what's 141,000 for the program. So just so that the board has an idea of the portion that the district would absorb at the different levels. Okay, and we had assumed 50 paid students, and so keeping that, so at $900, that would be $45,000 of revenue to the district, and so the additional cost would be about $96,000 to the district. At $1,200, the revenue would be $60,000, the additional cost to the district would be $80,000. At $2,000 tuition, the district receives $100,000 of revenue, and the additional cost to the district is $41,000. And then at the $2,500, we receive $125,000 of revenue, and the additional cost to the district is $15,000. And obviously at the $3,000, we break even, or maybe there's a little bit of surplus there.
A little surplus.
Is this 141, that's an annual number, or do we bump off the one-time costs? Because I'm looking at an annual number of 128.5. Is that right? Or are these is it one time every year?
The 141, right. Let's see.
The 10,000
Summer curriculum work would come off, and the supplies and materials would drop.
So roughly 130,000 a year.
Salary would increase year to year, correct?
Yeah, but then,
Yes,
right, you've
right.
got
It's-
increasing salaries and insurance.
Truthfully, the supplies, materials, and curriculum work, you effectively would amortize that over the useful life of those materials. So if it's a 4-year cycle or whatever, then, it's sort of 4 into 14,000 or whatever.
Can I ask a question, though, Kim, going back to you? One of the things that's here in front of us, and I had asked this question, it says here that the district will receive additional state aid for full-day student versus half-day. Now, we all know the state is, giving us vouchers.
Well,
So,
remember, we're on a flat grant.
Okay.
So we receive $218 per ADA. So there's a little bit, our average daily attendance will go up, but again, we're a poverty district, so we don't know what impact that will have on our poverty numbers.
Okay.
So it would be very difficult to project how much additional, there will probably be some, but to project exactly what
Okay.
the dollar amount looks like.
so, but I guess that's the question. So we might get some.
Right.
Right.
Okay, just for,
But I think these
just because it's in here.
Again, it's
Right.
a ballpark, it's an estimate, we're estimating we have 50 students, we, you
Right.
know.
Well, actually, we're estimating we have 85 students. We're projecting 50 of
that
them
will
would be
pay.
paying,
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay.
Right, and so obviously.
Keep saying 50, and I keep thinking there's a lot more than 50.
Yeah.
Right,
and
there's more
obviously
kids, but.
That could, go up or
Right,
down.
right.
Right. Some families may choose half-day, some, I don't think the board would disagree, but, those families where their child would truly benefit from an all-day program, but, qualify, or they don't have the means, I think those we'd work with those families. So that's why, you look at a number about 50 that you would be looking to have as tuition paying.
Dan or Dane?
Well, I'm fine with Shannon's proposal.
Without knowing a preschool number, and I would venture to guess that close to half of those kids attend some sort of preschool. I mean, it's high, but I know when sitting with preschool moms or kindergarten moms, so many people have said that they'd pay for all-day kindergarten if it was offered. And if I'm paying $10,000 a year for kindergarten elsewhere, if I'm paying $10,000 a year for preschool, $2,000 would be a steal. I'm assuming it wouldn't be a full-time price at the beginning. It'd be something that we could make payments on if
Oh,
necessary.
right, we would structure it, right.
Okay, and then I guess I was at, while I feel, Gary, I totally appreciate what you're saying, and I guess I would ask that question, and again, it's the first time we're doing this, so I wonder if, are we going to miss anybody? So, I say that, but, after we talked about this, I kind of went home and looked at, like, what we used to pay, for, preschool and all that kind of stuff. And I think, tell me if we're correct, when you had a survey, am I correct that there was a survey that said that parents would support paying for an
Right,
all-day?
when we did the strategic planning survey, there was a question, would you support a tuition all-day kindergarten? And it was an overwhelming positive response. I can't remember the exact percentage.
But there was no money attached to it.
Right, there were no dollar amounts attached
Okay.
to it, and it was a hypothetical.
So my knee-jerk was like maybe 1,500 or 1,600 as my, caveat as a number to go. Okay, now everyone's
I
heard
don't like
this.
saying mine first, so, not that everybody's.
Well,
All right,
there's two ways.
We haven't voted. And we
there-
still have to talk. We're still talking.
There's, one way to look at it, as Kim suggested, you can back into it and say, okay, what is the district absorbs 50% of the costs and the tuition picks up the other half, so we could back into the tuition that way, so that roughly $70,000 is covered by tuition and roughly $70,000 is district, and then if we bump above that 50 student number, our contribution is less,
So what does that make? Just reiterate, what's that number?
For which?
What's that cost then?
To get to 70,000 in tuition, Kim, what would that?
1,400.
1,400?
Yeah.
So if you went 1,400, basically what your target would be that 50% of the cost would be on the district, 50% would be on the families.
70% providing that cushion for, is that providing a cushion for
Right.
the reduced?
Right,
Yep.
right.
Let me ask you
built
this.
in.
Let me ask you this. Let's say, add that as a hypothetical. And if it becomes successful, I don't want to say this really too loud, but is that something like if it's a truly successful program, we could look at it every year and see if
Right.
what the value
you can,
is?
you can look at it every year and determine what that should be. If your expenses are growing, you would increase it. If you're having more tuition paid than anticipated, you might consider it flat for a while because of those salary increases. Eventually you'll catch up.
The average of every number here at the table is 1,543. Just
Okay.
find
Okay.
common ground.
Okay, so let's just go 1,500. Would you support that? Gary says no. Joel?
Yes.
Mary Kay?
Yes.
I would. Shannon?
I don't know, maybe. I mean, I just looked at what they recommended and figured we lop a little off the top and keep going. I didn't think we'd cut it in half or so I'd have to think about it a little bit, I guess.
Dan?
I'm completely disconnected at this point as to why we're all about covering, $70,000 worth of stuff here, but crash in two sections. So what this feels like to me is this wildly arbitrary number that we're picking out of the air. So I'm more inclined to sort of match the market, as it were. And the market that you guys looked at was sort of $2,000 or $2,000 to $2,500.
I would like to know more about our market, though, too. I'd really like to know if we had how many of the students are in preschool now. I think that would help me come to a number. So I don't know. I guess, I don't know, maybe.
I guess the problem here is that we're talking about it like, at the 12th hour, because we have to do something. We have to come up with some number to tell our families when they show up on the 15th. And we have to advertise, we have to put something in the paper, right? Don't we have to tell people we're doing this great thing? I would think that, I know there's a lot of people waiting to hear, and so, we would have to tell our families and new families and.
Right.
I have to be honest, I said I don't like to go first because, right out of the gates, I said 1,200, and then in listening to the table, because I completely agree with what Gary said. I completely agree with what Diane said. I completely agree with what Shannon said. Superintendent's recommendation is 2,500 to 3,000. Do we want to fill up the seats? Are we going to fill up the seats with a tuition level? My knee-jerk reaction is no way. We're never going to get people to pay, $3,000 for kindergarten. But if you extrapolate that out over the course of the year, it is a bargain. It is a bargain. So,
Okay, so does that mean you can?
I would go to the low end of this. I would go to the 3,000 or the 2,500 number. I would.
Well, I will say on that, after hearing this conversation, the value of the program, I could go to 2,000. And again, I don't feel that it's a number just coming out of the air, because you've been supplying us with material, and I know I've done my own homework. What did I pay for preschool? What did I pay for all of these things? So for me, I don't feel I'm just coming out of the air. It's just all we have. This is the first time we're talking about it. So
I think if we start at $2,000, we have a little wiggle room either way. If we decide the next year that there needs to be a little bit of an increase, we have a little room, and still we're very competitive. If we decide the next year that it didn't cost as much as we thought, or we have more paying students than we anticipated, we always have the option to take it down a little. I mean, $2,000 is kind of a good middle place, because we can move a little either way, potentially, depending on how the first year goes. And we're still in the, sort of comparatively speaking, right, around our whole area, we're still within those numbers.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So we're talking about 80 students. Is there any way this would be opened up to non-district kids? Or are we not even going there? That's a bad question, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't accepted, because every so often we get some families who would like to either have their, because they've moved out of the district, allow their child to continue their education, or they live in a different community and we don't allow tuition.
Right. And I know, if you try to go into another school, it's usually a much bigger number, so, okay.
So
where?
I have a question about the fees. Is it just going to be all or nothing? You either pay the whole thing or you qualify for free tuition, or is there some sort of graduated,
Right, it will be,
based on...
Kim and I will work together, right. It'll be based on the federal guidelines, and it will be prorated based upon the income of the family.
So it's a scale.
Right.
It's not all or nothing.
So it'd be a
Right,
scale.
it's not all or nothing.
And
there may be some students who qualify for a
We
complete
verify
waiver,
that?
but
A scholarship.
yes, we would verify that.
Okay.
All right,
Do we
so
need-
that gives me a little bit more room, because...
Verify the
Yeah,
income?
people,
Yep.
to verify the income and offer some sort of sliding scale. That makes sense, you can bring back, but to say, just to give a number to tell parents, 2,000, and then there'll be some sort of sliding fee adopted for that, but that at least parents can at least start planning, they have an idea.
Right.
Okay, so Kevin, as I see it, you need a couple things from us, that we're going to offer kindergarten program as amended. Let me just check on anything else. So
Right.
we're still not done with the money thing, but I'm just trying to what we're doing is we're talking about adding full day kindergarten, but we're not taking away the option of half-day.
Correct. You have to also offer a half-day program.
And as I recall, you were saying we are going, the classes will be at their neighborhood schools.
Right.
Okay. You still have to talk about dual language and stuff like that, and that might make some change. Is there anything else in there that I'm missing?
No, I think that's...
Okay, so let's just do this again. Money. 2,000. I'll say, Gary,
No.
you're no.
2,000 with the fee
Sliding
schedule.
scale.
Yeah, okay.
2,000.
Okay. I'll say 2,000. Shannon?
2,000.
Dan?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. And with this, when we're talking about a fee schedule, is that something, in addition to the free and reduced and all that, could this be something that is prorated through the year? Or does it have to be paid at the beginning?
No, we
Maybe
would,
half
payment
or
plan.
something?
No,
A
we would
payment.
do a payment plan.
Do a payment.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions on all-day kindergarten? You want to have a seat?
Sure.
Okay, just because we just did that one first, I would ask if we can take that vote first. All right, the action item. To approve all-day kindergarten program as amended, which summarizes that we will be offering a full-day kindergarten program at the cost of $2,000 per student. We're still offering half-day program. And we're at our neighborhood schools.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
No.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes. Okay, so that motion is carried, and can we ask to shout this from the mountaintops tomorrow morning or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, we'll,
just to get that
work on it, yeah.
out there, too? Okay, thank you. All right. The next is to approve the staffing. So start with, we are in full agreement that junior high would like 2.3, the senior high would like 1.7. And the majority of the board is looking at a reduction from the elementary at 3.65, which...
3.0.
I'm sorry, you're right, because 3.0, which is based on the information in front of us, and that is the reduction of one at Manning, one section, and combining two at Miller, so that's two at Miller. So the staffing...
Could I request that we split that? Do the junior high and high school as one vote and the elementary as a second?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, is that okay?
I'm sorry?
She wants to split the vote.
Oh,
You
yeah.
want senior high and elementary? I mean, secondary, and, okay, I have no is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Then let's start with to approve the 2013 staffing for the junior high and the senior high at 2.3 and 1.7 respectively.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
All right. And then the elementary, 3.0, basically one from Manning and two from Miller, a reduction in projected sections for next year. To approve the 2013-2014 staffing at the elementary level as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
No.
Mr. Charleston?
Whatever you do to the least of these, no.
Mrs. Thomas?
No.
Okay, so the motion carries for staffing at the elementary level. Superintendent's report.
All right. Let's see, the Joint Committee, we met on Tuesday, March 12th. And the Facilities Committee, we're kind of at a point where we are getting ready to put together a presentation for the board to consider of how to move forward with the needs of the district. And I'm anticipating in May we'll have that for the board. Strategic planning, they are pretty much have wrapped up their work. They're waiting on SMART goals from some of the other areas to finish that. And then the Climate Committee is, they've been previewing a movie with the possibility of it being shared with families and students. So that's what they're doing. In terms of grants, I'm happy to report that Laura Riley and Amy Jordan received a STEM mini grant from DuPage Regional Office of Education, and it's in the amount of $950. And then also our high school applied for the Advanced Placement Classes College and Career Success for All Students program grant, and this is to get more at-risk students involved in your AP program. And the requested amount was $47,900, and they received the full amount from the ISB. And so,
Jack, could you come back in here?
Hi.
Hi, did you hear that? Congratulations on
we're
getting
acknowledging the AP grant at the.
Just to say thank you. Just to say
That's all.
thank you.
Just wanted to say thanks.
That's fantastic.
One portion of that grant, and part of it is budgeted for a pre-AP, which is actually at the junior high level. So we'll be able to do some things at the junior high to get students ready for the AP experience at the high school level.
I would like to say Michelle Therese was a great help in putting that together.
And to Laura Riley for, it's fantastic. I didn't mean to sound so abrupt. I just wanted to say thank you.
And then dual language, again, we've been meeting on a regular basis, and there is some information contained in the board book related to it. And Kelly, is it the April 16th meeting? The April 16th meeting, we'll be doing the formal presentation to the board to see if there's support for moving forward with the dual language program. Again, it would be a program that would start at kindergarten and then grow that program. So eventually we had a K-5 program in the district. And so we're very excited about the possibilities there. Again, if the board did approve it, then one of those sections of all-day kindergarten would be a dual language program. If we didn't approve it for next fall, then again, we start off with 4 traditional, but there's the possibility that we need a self-contained program depending upon where our numbers come in at. Comprehensive literacy model, there is the kind of proposal for implementing for next year. And this would allow the district to really focus on literacy skills in our students K through 12. And it would begin with auditing our program and seeing what elements are currently in place and what elements we would need to improve upon. And then the administrators, we would go through a 2-day retreat related to the literacy model. And then we would then target classrooms in each of our buildings to set up model classrooms, lab classrooms, and then from there grow that program so that we were fully implemented going into the second year of implementation. So it's definitely, I think, for our district, it really can make some significant gains for us, and I'm looking forward to that implementation. I think it's really going to pay off great dividends for us.
Kevin, can I ask you a question? You had provided the board with some information on this comprehensive, and I actually read the whole thing, and I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I'm really excited about hearing about this. Is there any reason that this couldn't be put on our website?
No, we can, sure,
Okay.
we can get that posted on the website.
Because you had talked about that you went to this
Right.
board convention, how to transform your school in 180 days. I found this very exciting, and it just really sounds fantastic. So if we could share that,
Sure.
I would like that. Thank you. Okay. Are there any board reports?
Nothing from me.
I just have one quick comment. We acknowledged Laura Riley for winning the Educator of the Year. I also just wanted to mention for everybody's benefit that all 4 of the candidates for Educator of the Year in Westmont for the Chamber were from District 201. So we kind of had a lock this year on that award. And in addition to Mrs. Riley, who won the award, Dr. Bursick, Mr. Landreth, and Senorita Lott were also nominated for Educator of the Year. So I think just a really good year for District 201. We do share Westmont with a couple of other fairly successful schools and districts. So it was really nice to show up there and see that we already had won. It was just a matter of who got the high honors. So just wanted to make that remark.
Thank you for that. I have 2 things. Just one, I had given you, had asked Judy to make a copy, and this was in your folders last month, your orange folders. But the IASB is looking for a survey from Illinois school board members, and the survey is open from March 1st to April 1st. So if you are so inclined to participate in that, if you could please do so. It was a letter dated, it just says February 2013. It was in your orange folder. I think it was last meeting. If you need it, I can give it to you again. And then I guess the second thing is just very much looking forward to tomorrow night's fine arts event at the high school. It's a combined District 201 fine arts event, choral, band, art, and it's always a fantastic evening to see our students perform. So that's tomorrow night at the high school at 7 o'clock.
What's that?
6.
Don't the kids have to be there? It starts at 6?
I think the choral starts at 6, and the art is open before that.
Tomorrow night, let's just say come at 6 so you can be there early. So. Okay.
Marie,
so
I have
looking forward to that.
One other thing. Congratulations to our flag team at Westmont High School. They competed in state competition and placed second. So
yes, that was
good job to all the girls on the team.
Very good. Okay, and are there any other public comments?
I'd like to speak. Good evening, my name is Dan Chanel. I'm a parent of a special needs child who is currently going to North School. She will be going to Miller, and she will be one of the children who is going to be affected by the vote that you all took. And I would like to tell you all how disappointed that I am in that vote. I support what Ms. Hancock said in terms of the disconnect of your decision. I believe that it was partisan, and I'm very disappointed. I wish that I had an opportunity to make my feelings known before the vote was taken. I'd like to thank Ms. Thomas, Mr. Charleston, and Ms. Hancock for their support. And I also would support Mr. Charleston what he said before his vote, and that what you do to the least of these children, that you do unto the Lord. So I would just like to say that I'm going to do what I can for Miller and for the school district. However, I am very, very disappointed in the vote. I believe that there were other options, as Ms. Hancock said, that we could look at before forcing this vote. I'm very disappointed, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion to enter. The chair will enter a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing personnel issues and pending litigation. So moved.
Second.
And before we do the roll call, we will be coming back out for a vote. So roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Cafarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
We will be. In open, we have two items. The chair will entertain a motion to the chair will entertain a motion to approve the settlement agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli, yes. Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Okay, and then the second thing is the chair will entertain a motion to approve the personnel recommendations as presented.
So moved.
Second?
And roll call, please.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Caparelli, yes. Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Then the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.